You set your keys down on the table. You remember the sound they made. You even remember glancing at them as you walked away. But when you return, they're gone. You check the floor, your pockets, the couch cushions. Nothing. Hours pass, then they're back, sitting in the same exact spot where you left them. No one else was home. The table wasn't moved. It doesn't make sense. This happens more often than most people admit. A spoon vanishes from the kitchen. A sock disappears from a closed drawer. A phone you were just holding ends up under a blanket across the room. People usually laugh it off. I must be tired. Maybe I never put it there. But sometimes the memory is too sharp. You know where you placed the object. You know no one else moved it, and yet it moved, or vanished anyway. There are a few basic explanations people offer. The most common is human error. Our brains are good at guessing and filling in blanks, but they're far from perfect. You might think you put the keys on the table, but maybe you got distracted and dropped them on the shelf. When you find them later on the table, it's possible you overlooked them during your frantic search. But there are situations where this explanation falls short. Suppose you live alone, you double check, you scan every corner of the room, you even walk away and come back again. Still nothing. Then they reappear, not under something or next to something, but in plain sight, exactly where you were sure they weren't just a few minutes earlier. At this point, some people turn to psychological models. One theory involves a phenomenon called attentional blindness. If your brain doesn't expect to see something in a certain place, it might not register it, even when your eyes pass directly over it. You could be staring straight at your missing wallet and still not see it because your brain has filtered it out, especially under stress or distraction. This theory accounts for most minor vanishings, especially when the object turns up in the open later. Another possible explanation is dissociation. When people are stressed, tired, or deeply distracted, they can go on mental autopilot. You might move something without consciously remembering it. Your body completes the action, but your mind doesn't log the memory. You may not even be aware you pick the object up again and set it somewhere else. The memory gap can feel eerie. It feels like teleportation because the transition was invisible to your awareness. Still, not all incidents can be explained by psychology. That's when things get stranger. In folklore and supernatural belief systems, these vanishings often get pinned on mischievous forces. Some cultures blame house spirits, trickster figures, who move or hide objects for amusement. In European traditions, there are tales of brownies, kobolds, or domovoi who play small pranks on households. In some stories, they even return items later, often just to confuse the humans they live with. From a paranormal perspective, these events are sometimes described as displacement phenomena. People claim that objects phase out, shift between dimensions, or momentarily blink into non-existence. This idea has no basis in physics as we know it, but it's common in anecdotal reports. Someone sets their phone down. It's gone for minutes or hours. Then it reappears. No sound, no movement, as if reality hiccuped. Quantum physicists don't support these interpretations, but some fringe thinkers like to invoke quantum ideas to explain such occurrences. The idea is that at very small scales, particles don't have definite positions until they're measured. Some try to stretch this principle to everyday objects, suggesting that maybe, under rare conditions, larger objects can decohere or slip between probabilistic states. But this isn't how real quantum mechanics works. At the scale of keys, socks, or phones, these effects average out. You won't find a missing TV flickering into a parallel state. That's not science. It's fiction. Yet the feeling these events leave behind is real. It's a mix of confusion and unease. It shakes your confidence in memory and perception. One moment, you think you understand your environment. The next, the environment behaves in ways you can't explain. It's as if the rules of space and time shifted briefly when you weren't looking. Sometimes people associate these events with specific environments. A house that feels off. A room where things often go missing. The pattern forms slowly. First a pen, then a watch, then something more important. It's easy to ignore the first few times, but when it keeps happening and always in the same space, people start to wonder if something else is at play. Others tie it to emotional or energetic states. They claim that high stress, grief, or intense emotion can destabilize surroundings, as if consciousness interacts with the physical world more than we realize. This idea is common in psychic theory, though it lacks measurable support. Still, people report that objects start moving or disappearing during emotionally charged periods. Funerals, breakups, high anxiety. It doesn't mean there's proof of a mind-matter link, but it shows how tightly people connect their internal state with the behaviour of their world. There are also people who treat these incidents as clues, fragments of a larger puzzle. Some believe in simulation theory. If reality is a kind of rendered environment, like a computer game, then occasional glitches could happen. A texture failing to load, an object not appearing in memory storage. From this angle, a disappearing object might not be paranormal, but computational. You saw the keys, but then the render failed, and the object didn't exist until the next frame. Again, this is speculation, not science, but the metaphor feels useful to people trying to make sense of these gaps in reality. Even in science, though, we deal with uncertainty. Memory is not a camera, it's a reconstruction. Perception is not a mirror, it's a filtered guess. Your brain constantly edits your experience to keep it coherent. It smooths over gaps and contradictions. Most of the time, this works perfectly. But sometimes, the gaps show through. An object moves. A memory feels too sharp to be wrong. A table that was empty is suddenly not. People vary in how they respond, some shrug it off, others feel disturbed. A few turn to rituals, saying something out loud to return the object. Okay, keys, you've had your fun, and then they appear. This reinforces the sense that something unseen is involved. Whether it's psychological, spiritual, or symbolic, the pattern repeats, the object disappears, and after you stop searching, it comes back. There's no definitive answer. These incidents sit at the edge of what we can explain. They're too minor for science to study directly, yet too vivid for many people to ignore. They linger in the grey area between mistaken mystery, between forgetfulness and something else. You put your keys on the table, you were sure of it, and maybe, just maybe, you were right. You remember it clearly. Berenstain Bears. That's how it was spelled. You're sure of it. You read those books as a kid, and the name had an ein, like Einstein. Then one day, you see the books again, and it's Berenstain. Not just one copy. All of them. Every book, every video, every listing online. It's always been spelled with an you check old photos. It's still Berenstain. You start to wonder how your memory could be so off. This is the Mandela Effect. The term comes from a woman named Fiona Broome. In the early 2010s, she wrote about her strong memory that Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 1980s. She even recalled news coverage, the funeral, mourning across South Africa. But Mandela had lived until 2013. She wasn't alone. Other people also remembered him dying decades earlier. They couldn't explain it. Their memories felt too specific to be wrong. That mismatch between memory and fact became the core of what we now call the Mandela Effect. It's not about simple forgetfulness. These are confident, detailed memories that turn out to be inaccurate, not just for one person, but for groups of people. It's collective misremembering, and it creates confusion, frustration, and often an eerie feeling. You're not just forgetting where you put your keys. You're remembering a reality that no longer seems to exist. There are countless examples. People remember the Monopoly man having a monocle. He doesn't. They remember a movie from the 1990s called Shazam, starring comedian Sinbad as a genie. That movie doesn't exist. There's a real movie called Kazam with Shaquille O'Neal, but no known film with Sinbad in a genie costume. People have searched for years, even offering money to anyone who can find a VHS copy. Still nothing. Another common example is the line from Star Wars. Most people think Darth Vader says, "Luke, I am your father." The actual line is, "No, I am your father." It's a subtle difference, but it's one of the most misquoted lines in film history. For people who grew up quoting it, the correction sounds wrong, almost like a revision. This kind of thing shows up in brand names too. People remember Febreze with 2 E's. It's actually Febreze. They swear it was Oscar Mayer with an E, but it's Oscar Mayer, and the list keeps growing. Curious users compare memories, gather evidence, search for old products or VHS tapes to prove they're not imagining things. They rarely find anything that supports their version of the past. So what causes it? The most grounded explanation is faulty memory. Human memory is not a recording device. It doesn't play back exact footage. It reconstructs experiences using patterns, associations, and context. That means it's easy for errors to sneak in. If you saw a book title many times as a child, your brain may have auto-corrected it to a more familiar pattern, like Berenstein, since names like Einstein are common in culture. Over time, that version felt more real than the original. There's also the role of suggestion. Once someone points out a possible discrepancy, others might remember it the same way. This is especially powerful online, where one person's false memory can ripple through forums and comment sections until thousands of people believe they remember it too. It's not deliberate lying. It's the mind trying to resolve confusion by leaning into consensus. If others remember Berenstein, then maybe your memory is right. Psychologists describe this as a form of confabulation, when the brain fills in memory gaps with plausible but false details. It's more common than we think. You might remember a childhood room larger than it really was, or picture a grandparent's house with colours that don't match old photos. Memory drifts. It shapes itself to fit emotion, familiarity, and story. But the Mandela Effect doesn't just raise questions about memory, it raises questions about reality. Some people take a more speculative approach. They wonder if these false memories are actually evidence of alternate timelines. Maybe there was a world where Mandela died in the 1980s, or a world where the Monopoly man wore a monocle, and somehow we crossed into this one, a version of reality where the details don't quite match. This isn't a scientific idea, but it taps into a deep curiosity about how stable reality really is. The theory often references parallel universes. In quantum mechanics, the many worlds, interpretations suggest that every possible outcome happens in some branch of the universe. In one timeline, you ordered coffee. In another, you didn't. If this branching is constant, maybe memories from other branches sometimes bleed through. This idea isn't provable, and most physicists don't apply it to everyday memory errors, but it gives people a way to explain experiences that otherwise seem irrational. Simulation theory is another angle. If our reality is like a giant computer program, then the Mandela Effect could be a glitch, an update or patch that changed past details. The program used to render Berenstein. Now it renders Berenstain. The old memory lingers in your cache, but the current version of reality has been overwritten. Again, there's no evidence for this, but it helps express a feeling many people share, the sense that something is off. These speculative models aren't meant to replace science, but they show how easily people reach for stories when logic fails to soothe the discomfort. The mind wants the world to make sense. When it doesn't, we invent bridges between the memory and the fact. There's also an emotional layer. The Mandela Effect makes people feel unsettled. If your memory of something simple, like a logo or a name, can be wrong, what else are you remembering incorrectly? What if your whole timeline is a patchwork of errors? What if shared reality is more fragile than it seems? That discomfort feeds the phenomenon. When enough people feel it, they form communities. Reddit threads, YouTube channels, TikToks. People compare notes, track anomalies, build theories. Some are skeptical, others are convinced they've lived through a shift in reality. What started as a memory mistake becomes something much bigger, a mystery that tests your sense of truth. At its core, the Mandela Effect is a mirror. It reflects how the mind works, how memory forms, how people build consensus, and how they react when certainty breaks down. You remember Berenstein. You always will. But every piece of physical evidence says you're wrong. The gap between experience and reality is where the Mandela Effect lives. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. You're walking down the street and something catches your eye in the sky. A bird. But something's wrong. It's not flapping its wings, it's not gliding, it's not diving or rising, it's just hanging, still, mid-air. A pigeon or a sparrow suspended in a position that looks like a paused video frame. No movement, no sound. It stays like that for several seconds, even minutes, as if gravity and wind have forgotten it. Some people see insects the same way. A fly hovers motionless in front of their face. Its wings aren't moving, its body doesn't twitch, it just floats. In those moments, the world feels broken, like something small but crucial has stopped working. You look around, expecting someone else to notice. No one reacts. Then, just as suddenly, the bird or insect moves again. The spell breaks. But the feeling stays with you. People who experience this often describe it as eerie. It doesn't feel like an illusion or a trick of the light. It feels like reality has lagged or frozen. And it's always so specific. Not a blur, not a normal pause, but a hovering moment that defies basic physics. There are a few practical explanations. The most common is visual parallax. If a bird is flying directly toward or away from you, and the wind conditions are just right, it can appear to stay in place. Its body orientation and speed may trick your depth perception. Without background motion for reference, like trees or buildings, your brain loses its sense of how far or fast the bird is moving. It creates a floating effect. But when people describe these events, they often say there was a clear background. The bird wasn't moving in relation to the sky, wires, rooftops, anything. Then there's the possibility of hovering birds using wind resistance. Certain birds, like kestrels and hummingbirds, can hover in place for short periods. They beat their wings rapidly to maintain position. From a distance or in poor lighting, the fast motion might blur or vanish altogether. But this doesn't explain the moments when the wings appear totally frozen. No blur, no vibration, just stillness. As for insects, especially small ones like flies or gnats, hovering is more common. They can maintain position in the air using wing adjustments, especially indoors or on windless days. But again, if their wings aren't visibly flapping, it's odd. Even high-speed cameras struggle to capture insect wings without blur. Seeing a completely still insect suspended in air challenges what you expect from normal physics. A less grounded explanation involves the brain's visual processing. Your eyes constantly send images to your brain, but your brain smooths and stitches those images together. If the visual feed gets disrupted by lighting, fatigue, eye strain, or motion mismatch, you may experience what's called a temporal lag. This is like a dropped frame in a video. For a split second, the brain pauses visual refresh, and a moving object appears frozen. You still perceive the object, but the motion update didn't make it through. This kind of visual hiccup is more common than most people realize. It happens during saccades, when your eyes dart quickly between points. During a saccade, your brain briefly suppresses visual input to avoid blur. If a bird happens to be in motion during that gap, your mind may freeze the last image it saw. You'd perceive a hovering object, even if it had moved during that time. There's also the stroboscopic effect. This happens when a moving object is illuminated by flickering light, like a ceiling fan under a fluorescent bulb. If the flicker frequency matches the motion, it can create the illusion of stillness. A bird flying past a flickering streetlight at just the right frequency might seem frozen for a moment. This is rare in natural daylight, but it's possible around certain artificial lights, especially at dusk or dawn when contrast levels drop. Still, some people dismiss these explanations. They insist what they saw didn't just look frozen. It was frozen. No blur, no subtle twitch, just complete suspension, and not for half a second, but for several seconds or longer. They describe it not as visual confusion, but as a break in reality, a moment where the laws of motion seem to pause. Some call it a glitch, others just call it wrong. This is where the theories branch out. Some people believe these are literal glitches in the matrix, a momentary lapse in whatever system renders reality. If you assume the world is a simulation, then freezing birds or insects would be signs of system strain, like lag in a video game. The world loads imperfectly, a frame drops, an object gets stuck mid-animation. It resumes later, but for those who saw it freeze, the illusion of seamless reality is broken. Others bring up time anomalies. If time flows differently in small pockets, whether due to natural anomalies or metaphysical causes, then maybe some creatures get caught in those pockets. They're not actually floating. Time is just slower or paused in that spot. These ideas don't align with current physics, but they appeal to those looking for an explanation that matches the feeling of the experience. There's also a psychological theory called apophenia, the tendency to see patterns or meaning in random data. In moments of boredom or hyper-awareness, the brain may amplify unusual events and frame them as significant. Seeing a hovering bird might not be strange in itself, but your brain tags it as important because it conflicts with expectations. From that point on, the memory becomes charged, more vivid, more detailed, more eerie than it really was. But none of these theories remove the central problem. We expect the world to follow consistent rules. When a bird appears to break those rules, by hovering perfectly still without any visible effort, it unsettles us. The brain tries to resolve the tension, and if no explanation fits, it stores the moment as a mystery. Something doesn't add up, and the memory lingers. You don't forget the first time you saw a frozen bird. You play it back in your mind, looking for signs you were mistaken. Maybe it was stuck on a wire. Maybe it was a model. Maybe you blinked oddly. But none of those answers feel right. You saw it. You know what you saw, and even if you never see it again, the moment reshapes how you think about what's possible. Not in a grand philosophical way, but in a quiet, personal way. The world cracked just a little, and for a few seconds a bird forgot to fall. You've driven this route 100 times. You know the turnoff by heart. There's a coffee shop on the corner, then 2 traffic lights, then a narrow street you always take to avoid the main road. But today, the corner is empty. The coffee shop is gone. No trace, no boarded windows, no demolition signs. Just an old office building that looks like it's been there for decades. You drive slowly, confused. You check your GPS. It shows the office building too. You turn around, you double back. Still nothing. The narrow street is gone too. There's no opening where it should be. Just a long stretch of uninterrupted wall. You start to wonder if you've taken the wrong road, but everything else looks right. The layout has changed, or worse, your memory has. This experience isn't rare. People describe entire streets vanishing, alleys they used to cut through now blocked by buildings, a familiar plaza replaced with a parking lot, or a whole neighbourhood feels slightly off. Mailboxes in new spots, fences taller than they should be, trees missing. You ask someone who lives nearby and they say it's always been like this. They've never heard of the street you're talking about. The most grounded explanation is misremembering. The brain stores locations in a flexible, approximate way. When you repeat a route many times, you don't memorize every detail. You store key landmarks, turn angles, and relative distances. That mental map works well most of the time, but when something changes, even slightly, the brain may misplace pieces of the route. A store you thought was on one corner might have been on the next. A small side street might have been a parking lot you mistook for a road. Still, some cases go beyond simple memory error. People insist the missing road had street signs, stoplights, even traffic. Some describe buildings with vivid detail, brick colour, signage, even smells from a bakery or a restaurant. These aren't vague impressions, they're specific emotional memories. You're not misplacing a landmark, you're remembering a location that no longer seems to exist. There's a psychological term called source confusion. It refers to when the brain remembers information correctly but forgets the origin. You might recall a street you saw in a dream, a movie, or an old photo and mix it into your real-world memory. Over time, the brain treats the fictional location as real, embedding it into your mental map. Then when you visit the area again and don't find it, the absence feels like a loss. The memory is clear, but the source was never physical. Another explanation involves changes that happened without your awareness. Cities evolve constantly. Streets close, shops shut down, buildings get repainted or repurposed. A familiar place can look completely unfamiliar after renovation. If you've been away from the area, or even if you pass it regularly but don't pay close attention, those changes can feel like sudden shifts. You might ask, wasn't there a gas station here? But it shut down 6 years ago, and now it's a dental office with the same footprint. You didn't notice the transition, so your mind flags it as a reality glitch. But some people report these experiences in ways that defy typical explanations. They say they visited a street last week and it's missing today. They describe changes that feel too large to happen overnight. Not just one shop or one corner, but entire layouts being rearranged. A curved road is now straight. A block that used to be residential is now filled with warehouses. These aren't decades-old memories, they're recent. And when no one else recalls the change, the experience becomes unsettling. Some call this a reality shift. It feels like stepping into a parallel version of your city. Everything is almost the same, but just off enough to make you doubt yourself. You look for old photos, news clippings, satellite images, anything to prove the road existed, but you find nothing. Your memory insists one thing. The world insists another. There's also the idea of liminal spaces, places that exist at the edges of memory and presence. An empty parking garage, an overgrown alley, a dead-end road you've only seen once. These places feel unstable, dreamlike. Some people believe the mind can't anchor them fully. They drift in and out of recall, appearing vivid one day and unreachable the next. The lost street might have been real, but something about it made it prone to erasure. Simulation theory comes up again in this context. If the world is rendered only as needed, maybe unused streets or buildings unload to save resources. When no one visits a location for a while, the simulation forgets to render it next time. It sounds far-fetched, but it explains the feeling people describe, that something real has been overwritten, as if the world was edited behind the scenes. More metaphorically, the loss of familiar geography reflects a deeper uncertainty about permanence. The world we walk through every day feels stable, because our minds smooth over the gaps. But when that stability breaks, when a landmark vanishes or a road disappears, it reminds us how fragile our certainty is. You trust your memory, you trust the ground beneath your feet. When either shifts, it shakes your sense of what's real. Sometimes the experience feels personal. The missing building wasn't just a place, it was tied to emotion. The bar where you met someone, the street you walked every day after school. When it disappears, it feels like a part of you was erased. You try to confirm it with others. Some shrug, some vaguely agree, but no one matches your clarity. You stand there, feeling out of step with the present. People try to make sense of these events in whatever language they have: memory failure, urban development, parallel timelines. Each explanation helps a little, but none resolve the feeling entirely. You keep scanning the street, hoping the bakery will reappear. You check old maps, you ask long-time residents, you try to let it go. But that mental snapshot, the one with the old curve in the road, the red brick store, the missing alley, it doesn't fade. It stays sharp, like a photo from a place that should exist, a place that maybe did, or maybe didn't. Either way, you remember walking then, and you don't know why you can't walk there now. You're walking down the street. Cars pass, people talk, The city hums around you. Nothing special is happening. But then, something shifts. The noise softens. The movement around you slows, not in reality, but in how you perceive it. You feel still, grounded, as if time stretched just enough for you to step outside of it. For a few seconds, maybe longer, everything feels clear. The clutter in your mind falls away. You understand where you are, who you are, and what matters. You don't question it in that moment. You just know. This is sudden clarity. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't follow logic or routine. It can happen in the middle of chaos or silence. You might be waiting in line or sitting in traffic. You might be brushing your teeth or watching light hit a wall. The trigger isn't always dramatic, but the feeling is unmistakable. It's like seeing through clean glass after a lifetime of looking through fog. Thoughts align. Tension drops. You're no longer stuck in loops of worry or memory. You're just here. These moments don't last long, often only seconds, but they're deep enough to make you pause. Afterward, the noise of life returns. You remember your to-do list. The tension creeps back, but something in you stays quiet like a small ember. You carry that clarity forward, even if only as a memory. People describe this in different ways. Some say they felt like they woke up from a mental fog. Others describe it as a zoom out, as if they stepped back and saw the whole picture at once. Not just their current situation, but their whole life, their choices, their habits, the things they've ignored or avoided. In that moment, everything makes sense. The pieces fit together. There's a neurological basis for this. Your brain constantly filters the world. It limits input so you're not overwhelmed. Most of the time, you're not fully present. You're multitasking, planning, remembering, predicting. But sometimes, the filters drop. The prefrontal cortex, which controls planning and analysis, quiets down. Your attention settles. You stop projecting forward or backward and just observe. When that happens, even simple things, shadows on a floor, leaves blowing in the wind, can feel profound. This shift can also come from emotional release. If you've been under stress, your mind stays tangled. But once the pressure breaks, whether from crying, laughing, or even total silence, your system resets. Clarity rises from the space that stress used to fill. It's like unclogging a drain. Thoughts flow again, clean and simple. Another trigger is awe. Sometimes beauty cuts through noise. You might see the ocean for the first time in years, or notice sunlight breaking through clouds in a way that stops you. For a moment, your mind stops trying to solve things. It just takes in the scene. That pause is where clarity lives. Not in thought, but in awareness. Your mind isn't doing, it's seeing. Some people experience this in near-death moments or brushes with danger. A car swerves toward you. A loud crash erupts behind you. Time seems to slow, but you don't panic. Instead, your senses heighten. You act, not out of fear, but out of focus. Later you realize how calm you felt, how clear your thoughts were. The body's survival systems kick in, but they do more than protect you. They sharpen you. You can also feel sudden clarity in conversation. You're talking to someone, maybe about something ordinary, then a sentence lands. A truth is said aloud, something you felt for years but never named. The room feels still. You see yourself in a new light. That's not just insight. That's the mind pulling everything into line for a brief second, offering you a glimpse of something solid underneath the shifting surface of daily life. Philosophers and writers have explored this feeling for centuries. The Stoics talked about flashes of rational understanding, a moment where virtue, choice, and control align. In Zen, it's called satori, a brief awakening. Not enlightenment, but a short, clean break from confusion. Even in psychology, thinkers like Carl Jung describe these moments as glimpses into the unconscious, where everything hidden rises just long enough to show its shape. But the experience doesn't need labels. You know it when it comes. It's when you stop chasing explanations and feel a quiet yes inside. Not a loud triumph, not an epiphany you shout to others, just a clear breath, a full stop. And what's strange is how these moments often come without effort. You can't force them. They're not the result of overthinking. In fact, they usually arrive because you stopped trying to force answers. You were tired. You were still. You gave up just long enough for your mind to loosen its grip. And in that loosened grip, something slipped through. This doesn't mean the feeling is mystical. It might be your brain syncing up. It might be pattern recognition resolving a long-standing conflict. But the effect is powerful because it contrasts so sharply with everyday experience. Most of the time we move through life in partial awareness. We react, we guess, we carry fragments. But in sudden clarity, the fragments connect. You see your habits, your fears, your wants, not with judgment, just as facts, like reading a map of yourself drawn in clear lines. Afterward, the feeling fades, the city gets loud again, the distractions return, you go back to doing, fixing, planning. But you remember the moment. It felt real in a way nothing else does. You may not be able to hold on to it, but that doesn't lessen its impact. It leaves a mark, not a conclusion, but a change in direction, like a compass quietly clicking back into place. You walk on, and though the world looks the same, something in you has shifted. You saw through the fog just for a moment, and even if you never explain it, you know it happened. You wake up one morning and notice something strange on your arm, a thin white line, about 2 inches long. It looks like a healed scar, raised slightly, smooth and pale. But you don't remember cutting yourself there. You press on it. No pain, just skin that healed long ago. You try to recall any accident, scrape or surgery. Nothing comes to mind. You ask a family member or a friend, and they don't remember you having that scar either. You shrug it off. A week later, you glance at your arm again, and it's gone. The scar that felt so real yesterday has vanished. The skin is even-toned, unbroken. No mark, no redness, not even the faintest trace of where it used to be. You check again later, still nothing. Then days or months later it returns, same size, same place, same strange familiarity. But no cause, no explanation, and no memory to tie it to. This isn't a common experience, but it happens often enough to raise questions. People report scars appearing in places they don't remember injuring. Some report scars they've had for years suddenly fading, sometimes completely, sometimes partially, only to come back. Others claim new marks show up overnight, sometimes looking fresh, sometimes already healed. The strange part isn't just the scar, it's the absence of cause. The most direct explanation is memory error. You might have scratched yourself while asleep, bumped into something, or had a skin reaction you didn't notice in the moment. The mark heals, and the scar remains. But because the injury didn't register consciously, the scar feels like it came from nowhere. The reverse is also true. Scars can slowly fade over time, especially surface-level ones. If you don't examine your skin closely every day, you might not notice the change until it's almost complete. Then when you do look, it feels like the scar vanished suddenly. Still, some cases seem to defy that logic. A raised, thick scar doesn't usually fade quickly. And old surgical scars, especially those formed from deep tissue damage, don't come and go. Yet some people report just that. A knee scar from childhood disappears for years, then reappears without injury. A burn mark on a finger fades completely, then returns during a stressful period. It's not just about remembering the scar. It's the physical reality of it changing when no trigger is present. There are skin conditions that might account for some of these cases. Dermographism, for example, causes raised marks when the skin is scratched, even lightly. These marks can look like scars for a short time. Keloids and hypertrophic scars may grow, fade, or change colour based on inflammation, weather, or even hormone levels. Some people have autoimmune conditions that affect skin healing, causing random flare-ups or changes in old scar tissue. In these situations, what appears to be a new or vanishing scar might actually be a natural response by sensitive skin. But not all of these cases fit medical patterns. Some people say they had a scar for decades, a clear, consistent one. Then one day it was just gone. They hadn't treated it. They hadn't used any cream. They weren't even thinking about it. It simply vanished, or reversed. Others report a scar showing up that looks exactly like one they had in a dream, a mark they imagined or remembered from childhood, now physically present on their skin. That kind of connection raises harder questions. Some turn to psychological theories. The body often reflects the mind's stress. When under deep emotional strain, people may unconsciously scratch, rub, or pick at their skin. These actions might go unnoticed but leave marks that feel unexplained later. Dissociation can play a role too. In dissociative states, a person might injure themselves or be injured without forming a clear memory. Later, when the scar appears, it seems unconnected to any experience. Trauma can also store itself in the body in unpredictable ways. People with post-traumatic stress sometimes report phantom sensations, pain where no wound exists, or marks that appear without clear injury. These may relate to unconscious muscle tension, circulation changes, or stress-induced immune reactions. But the timing and shape of the marks can still feel uncanny. If a scar returns in the same shape and place as a long-forgotten injury, it triggers a deeper discomfort. Then there's the possibility of misattribution. You may have had the scar all along, but your mind filtered it out until it fit a pattern. You start focusing on your arm or your chest or your leg, and suddenly you notice a line or spot that was always there. It feels new, not because it is new, but because your attention has changed. In that sense, the scar didn't appear. You simply became aware of it. And when you stop focusing, it vanishes again, not physically, but perceptually. Still, not everyone accepts those explanations. Some believe these marks are symbolic, echoes of past lives, alternate timelines, or emotional wounds made visible. In folklore and esoteric traditions, scars have often been treated as signs. In some traditions, a birthmark or spontaneous scar was believed to show how someone died in a previous life. In modern fringe beliefs, some say the body retains information across versions of the self, so a scar you once had in a different life or timeline might reappear when something aligns. That might sound too abstract, but it captures the feeling people describe, that the scar doesn't just appear, it means something. It's not just skin, it's a message, a reminder, a symbol of something unfinished. Maybe it's a fear you haven't faced, a wound you ignored, or something deeper that you've tried to forget. Others invoke simulation theory. If this world is rendered moment to moment based on attention and interaction, then scars, like objects, rooms, or memories, might not be permanently stored. They're loaded when needed. If no one's looking at your arm for months, maybe the simulation saves space. When you do look again, the scar is either there or not, depending on how reality resolves itself. There's no evidence for that theory, but it explains the unease people feel. When a part of your body changes without reason, it shakes your sense of control. Your body is supposed to obey rules. Injury, healing, scarring. All of it follows a timeline. But when the timeline breaks, when the cause vanishes or never existed, you're left questioning more than skin. You're questioning memory, reality, and the limits of what you can trust. You touch the scar again. It's there, pale, familiar, and yet foreign. You don't know when it came or why, but you know it wasn't always there. Or maybe it was. You're not sure anymore, and that's what stays with you. Not the mark itself, but the silence around it. You're alone in your house. The TV's off. No one's outside. It's quiet. Then you hear it. Your name. Soft but clear. Not a noise. Not static. Not a thump or a creak. A voice. Familiar or unfamiliar, male or female, doesn't matter. It says your name. Just once. You turn. Nothing's there. You check the hallway. Empty. You stand still, waiting to hear it again. It doesn't come back. but you know what you heard. This isn't rare. People report hearing their names called when no one's around more often than most admit. It can happen during daily chores, late at night, walking alone, or even in crowds where no one's speaking to you. It's brief. It never repeats more than once or twice. But it's distinct enough that you stop what you're doing and look for a source. Sometimes it sounds like a whisper, other times like a normal speaking voice. And most of the time it comes out of nowhere. The simplest explanation is auditory memory. Your brain stores voices the way it stores faces. If someone close to you says your name often, that voice becomes part of your inner recall system. In quiet moments, when your mind wanders, your brain might trigger that memory. It doesn't sound like a thought, it sounds like a voice. You hear it the way you'd hear something outside yourself, even though it came from within. This effect is strongest when you're under stress, tired, or in sensory isolation. If you're in a quiet room or walking somewhere alone, your brain has less input. It tries to fill the silence, a small mental twitch, a slight memory flare, and you hear something. Your name most often, because that's the word your brain is most trained to respond to. Another explanation is auditory pareidolia. This happens when your brain interprets random noise as something familiar, like hearing words in the wind or music in the hum of a fan. Your brain constantly looks for patterns. If it catches a certain pitch or rhythm that resembles the shape of your name, it might fill in the rest. You don't hear the wind, you hear a voice, and not just any voice, one saying your name. The effect gets more convincing when the environment is ambiguous. The more silence, the more chances your brain has to fill in gaps. A creak in the pipes, a footstep upstairs, a soft echo in a hallway. Your mind scans it for meaning. It's not broken, it's doing its job, but it sometimes chooses the wrong pattern, and it always picks your name first. That's the word most deeply tied to your attention system. You can sleep through alarms, but if someone says your name even softly, you wake up. This is why people sometimes hear their names even in dreams or right before sleep. The boundary between conscious and unconscious loosens. Your brain plays back fragments, a voice, a word, a memory, and your waking mind tries to assign it meaning. It doesn't feel like a thought or a dream, it feels real. But there's no one there. For some, these experiences aren't unsettling. They shrug them off. For others, they're deeply unnerving. The clarity of the voice makes it feel like someone should be nearby. You start questioning your senses. You wonder if you imagined it. You may even start searching for a rational cause. Electrical interference, thin walls, someone outside. But nothing fits. You heard your name, and now you can't explain why. There are psychological theories too. Under stress or emotional strain, the mind may project internal conflict outward. A part of you wants attention, a part of you is calling you back. Some psychologists believe these voice-like moments could be a benign form of internal dialogue, misinterpreted as external. You're not hallucinating in the clinical sense. You're just catching your own mind speaking back to itself in a voice you didn't expect. But there are other interpretations that go beyond psychology. Some people believe these voices come from spiritual sources, not ghosts or demons in the horror movie sense, but something quieter, ancestral memory, parallel presence, or energy that echoes. In many cultures, hearing your name with no source is seen as a sign that someone is thinking of you, or that you've brushed against a spiritual threshold. It's not always seen as bad. Sometimes it's taken as a reminder to pay attention. Still, there's a warning in some traditions. Folklore in several regions suggests you shouldn't respond when you hear your name with no source. They say that whatever is calling you may not be friendly, or that answering gives it power. These beliefs come from older, animistic ideas where voice equals presence, and presence equals intention. If something calls you by name, it knows something about you, and in older thought systems, that's dangerous. From a neurological view, none of this is necessary. The brain is powerful enough to trick itself without outside input. Hearing your name with no source doesn't mean you're losing your mind. It doesn't mean you're being haunted. It just means your auditory system, your memory system, and your attention system briefly got their wires crossed. But that doesn't change how it feels. You hear your name, you freeze, you scan the room, you listen for footsteps, for movement, for any sign that someone is near. You might even say something aloud. Hello? Just to break the silence. When nothing answers, you feel two things at once, relief and unease. The moment passes, but it lingers. You don't forget it. And maybe that's what's most interesting. These moments stick. They're small, simple, just a voice, but they carve themselves into memory. You might forget whole conversations from last week, but you won't forget the time you heard your name and no one was there. It doesn't just surprise you, it disrupts the script. For a second, the world isn't behaving the way it's supposed to. And whether you explain it with brain science, sleep cycles, or something else entirely, you're left with a question you can't answer. Who called your name? And why? You're sitting in a cafe. The waitress walks by, a man drops his spoon, someone laughs in the corner, and suddenly you freeze. You've seen this before. The exact motion of the waitress, the sound of the spoon, the timing of the laugh. You know what's going to happen next, and it does. For a few seconds, the moment feels like a replay. Not just familiar, identical. Then the feeling slips away, and everything returns to normal. You sit there wondering what just happened. That moment is called Déjà vu. It's French for already seen. It describes the feeling that a current experience is repeating, even though you know it's the first time it's happened. You can't explain it, and you can't prove it. You just know you've experienced this before. Not just the place, but the sequence, the details, the atmosphere, and the confidence in that feeling is what makes it strange. You know it doesn't make sense, but you also know it's real. Most people experience déjà vu at least once in their lives. Some people experience it more often, especially when they're tired, stressed, or in unfamiliar environments. It tends to happen quickly, just a few seconds, and disappears before you can fully analyze it. You try to hold on to the feeling, to explore it, but it always fades before you get a grip on it. The brain tries to make sense of it. It scans memory, checks the surroundings, searches for any matching experience. You might ask yourself, have I been here before? Did I dream this? Did I watch this in a movie? But no match appears. That gap, the certainty of familiarity with no source, creates the eerie quality of déjà vu. There are several theories about why it happens. One explanation is a glitch in memory processing. Normally, your brain processes experiences in stages. First, it takes in sensory input. Then it passes that input through short-term memory, before moving it to long-term storage. If that process skips or overlaps, if the brain misfiles a new experience as a memory, you get the sense that it's already happened. The experience feels like recall, not perception. You're living something for the first time, but your brain is tagging it as a repeat. Another theory suggests a timing mismatch between two parts of the brain. The temporal lobe, which processes sensory data, might momentarily signal the hippocampus, the memory center, as if the input is a stored memory. You then feel recognition without a clear source. The brain tries to resolve the contradiction, and what you get is the brief sensation of familiarity layered onto the present moment. Some studies suggest that déjà vu is more likely when the current situation closely resembles small, forgotten details from past experiences. Maybe the light, the smell, the background sound, all together match a similar moment from years ago. You don't consciously remember the earlier scene, but your brain does. It triggers the familiar signal, even though you can't access the original memory. This fits with what's known about implicit memory. That's the kind of memory you don't consciously recall, but that still influences your perception. It's like muscle memory, or the feeling you get when a certain song triggers an emotion. You may not know why you feel something, but the brain is connecting dots behind the scenes. Déjà vu might be one of those connections surfacing without context. There are also dream-based explanations. Some people believe that déjà vu moments come from dreams they don't remember. You might have dreamed about a cafe with red curtains and a broken chair. When you later walk into a real cafe with those same details, your brain matches the setting to the dream. Because the dream wasn't stored in conscious memory, it feels like the moment came from nowhere. The feeling is real, but the source is hidden. Other people take a more speculative view. They suggest déjà vu is evidence of parallel lives or alternate timelines. In that version, the feeling isn't a mistake, it's a crossover. You're experiencing something your other self already did. For a few seconds, your timelines sync, and you sense a memory that isn't from this life. It's not science, but it captures the sense of being slightly out of sync with time. Some go further, suggesting déjà vu as a sign that you're on the right path, that your current choices are aligning with some deeper plan, destiny, or pattern. That's why the moment feels familiar, they say, because you're where you're supposed to be. Again, this isn't a testable idea, but it shows how much people want meaning from the experience. The feeling is so intense and so rare that it feels like a signal, not an error. Neurological studies link déjà vu to specific areas of the brain, especially the temporal lobes. People with temporal lobe epilepsy sometimes report intense, frequent déjà vu episodes before seizures. That's led some researchers to think the phenomenon may involve brief electrical misfires in memory circuits. But these are extreme cases. Most people don't have epilepsy and still experience déjà vu. The challenge is that the episodes are short, unpredictable, and hard to study in real time. Still, they're powerful. During that moment, you question everything. Time feels thin. Logic blurs. It doesn't feel like a coincidence or a vague hunch. It feels like a memory, and even after the moment fades, it leaves a residue. You wonder how something so real can vanish so quickly. You wonder how your brain can trick you so precisely. Some people experience déjà vu along with other effects: intense calm, emotional surges, or an expanded sense of awareness. Others feel a spike of anxiety, like they've stepped into a loop or glitch. Either way, the body reacts. The moment may last only seconds, but the mind stretches it. You replay it again and again, trying to catch the edge of it, trying to understand. But déjà vu resists understanding. That's its nature. It feels like a clue with no solution. You know you've been here. You know this is the first time. Both feelings live in your mind at once, with equal weight. You sit with the contradiction, and then it passes. The waitress walks away, the spoon is picked up, the moment moves on, and so do you. But you don't forget it. Not because it was dramatic or emotional, but because it made time feel like a loop. And for a few seconds, it seemed like your life was repeating itself, and you caught it in the act. You sit with a group of friends talking about news events from the past. Someone mentions the death of a famous actor. Robin Williams, for example. You nod, but something feels off. You remember hearing about that years before they say it happened. You remember the headline, the feeling, even where you were when you heard it. But when you look it up, the dates don't match. You're not off by a day or a week, you're off by years. The memory is solid, but the timeline is wrong. This isn't just about forgetting. You're not confused about what happened. You're confident when it happened. You place it in a certain year, maybe linked to something else in your life. You might say, that happened while I was still in college, only to realise the date was long after you graduated. Or you think something happened recently, but it turns out to be from a decade ago. The content of the memory is clear, but the position in time is wrong. This kind of temporal mismatch is called a misplaced timeline. It's a specific form of memory error, where the event is real, but its placement in your personal chronology is not. It doesn't feel like forgetting. It feels like the timeline itself shifted under your feet. One common example involves major political events. Someone might remember the Brexit vote happening in 2014, not 2016. Or they might swear the Challenger shuttle disaster happened in 1983, not 1986. When corrected, they feel disoriented, like history doesn't line up with their lived experience. The emotional tone of the memory stays consistent, but its timestamp doesn't. This phenomenon often shows up with celebrity deaths. People insist they heard about a death years earlier. They may even recall mourning it, talking about it, or reading tributes online. Then the death happens again, and the world treats it as new. But to them, it's old news. Others around them have no memory of the earlier version. It creates a strange isolation, like being the only one who remembers a version of history that no longer exists. There are psychological explanations for this. Human memory is not a fixed timeline, it's a reconstruction, assembled from fragments. Sensory input, emotional tone, external cues. Your brain stores events loosely, not with exact dates, but with associations. That happened around the time I got that job, or that was before the move. If you misplace one of those anchors, the whole memory shifts. For example, if you saw two similar news stories years apart, a scandal, a resignation, a natural disaster, your mind might compress them. One event becomes a placeholder for another. You might remember the general content correctly, but assign it the wrong date based on context. The stronger the emotion tied to the event, the more certain you'll feel. But that certainty doesn't mean accuracy. It just means the memory is vivid. Another cause is media repetition. News outlets revisit old events in documentaries, anniversaries, and retrospectives. If you see footage from the 2001 World Trade Center attacks in a 2021 documentary, your brain may misfile the memory. You remember watching it, but forget it was a replay, not a live broadcast. Later, you recall seeing it in 2021, when the actual event happened 20 years earlier. That blending of new context with old content creates timeline confusion. There's also the role of collective memory. When a large group remembers something happening differently, individual memory tends to follow. If many people say they remember a public figure being arrested in 2005, you might adopt that memory. Even if it happened in 2009, you trust the group's certainty. And once the memory takes root, it becomes harder to dislodge. This effect is amplified online, where thousands of people might reinforce a wrong timeline at once. Sleep and stress also impact memory consolidation. When you're tired, anxious, or emotionally overloaded, your brain struggles to store and tag events properly. A major news story might get logged without a clear timestamp. Later, when you retrieve it, your brain guesses based on emotion, familiarity, or surrounding events. You don't feel uncertain, you feel sure, but your internal timeline has drifted. In some cases, the misplaced timeline overlaps with déjà vu or the Mandela Effect. You might remember an event before it was supposed to happen. A news story breaks, and you get a cold feeling because you've already seen it in your mind. You knew the headline, you knew the outcome, and now it's playing out exactly as you recalled. It doesn't feel like coincidence, it feels like time doubled back. These cases are hard to study, because the error isn't in the event, it's in the sequence. The content is real, the date is real. The confusion lies in how your mind arranges them. Most memory studies focus on whether people recall facts. Misplaced timelines show that even accurate facts can sit on the wrong shelf. There's a philosophical discomfort in this. We like to believe our past is solid, that once something happens, it stays where it is. But memory isn't built like that. It's fluid. And time, for the brain, is not measured in clocks but in relationships. What happened before what? What happened when you felt that way? What happened while your life was shifting? When you misplace a timeline, you're not just making a factual mistake, you're feeling a fracture in your personal map of history. If the memory moved, what else might move? How much of what you know is pinned down by actual time? And how much is just scaffolding your brain built to make sense of life? You check the date again, you read the article again. The event happened in 2016. You would have sworn it was 2012. Not vaguely, exactly. You had a conversation about it. You remember the weather. You remember what you were wearing. But the facts say otherwise. You stare at the screen, you nod, you accept the correction. But inside, the moment still feels like a fold in the page. Like history didn't change, but somehow your place in it did. You're riding a bus, half asleep, half aware. It's one of those normal days where nothing stands out, until it does. You glance down the aisle and notice a man in a grey hoodie, black jeans and white sneakers. He's scrolling through his phone, nothing unusual, but then you spot another man, a few seats ahead, dressed exactly the same. Same grey hoodie, same black jeans, same white sneakers, same brand of phone, same posture. Head tilted down, right ankle resting over left knee, thumb swiping screen. Not just similar, identical. For a moment, you wonder if you're seeing a reflection. But there's no mirror. They're real. Two strangers, copy and paste. You try not to stare, but you keep glancing. Their hands move the same way. They lift their heads at the same time. It doesn't feel random. It feels arranged. You look at the people around them. No one else seems to notice. You want to say something, but what would you say? Hey, you two look exactly the same. It feels silly, but the feeling isn't. The brain notices patterns quickly, faster than we think. It's trained to spot similarities, faces, gestures, behaviour. Usually this helps. It's how we recognise friends in a crowd or sense tension in a room. But when the pattern is too perfect, it creates discomfort. A sense that something isn't quite right. Your brain expects variation. When it doesn't see it, when two strangers match in every detail, it flags the moment as unnatural. There are grounded reasons why people end up looking alike. Fast fashion, limited colour palettes, trend cycles. Stores like Zara, Uniqlo and H&M mass-produce clothes. Popular phone models dominate the market. Social media influences posture and behaviour. People carry themselves in similar ways without realising it. If two strangers wear the same brand, use the same phone, and adopt the same body language, it's not impossible. But when it all happens at once, on the same bus within the same field of vision, it hits harder. This experience often passes quietly. You tell yourself it's coincidence. Statistically it could be, but some situations feel too exact. Maybe they both have the same haircut. Maybe their faces resemble each other. Maybe one scratches his nose and the other does too, same timing, same angle. It goes beyond clothes or gadgets. It starts to feel choreographed, like you're watching two actors rehearsing a scene. These moments fall into a broader category of what's called reality hiccups. Small breaks in normal experience that leave you unsure whether the world is behaving the way it should. It's not supernatural. Nothing explodes. No one vanishes. But the familiarity, the duplication, creates a kind of vertigo. Your brain briefly questions its grip on the environment. Some people connect these experiences to the concept of doppelgängers, an old German word meaning double walker. Folklore treats the doppelgänger as a bad omen, a spectral twin, a warning. But what happens when both versions are real and neither one is you? When you're watching two versions of someone else and neither one notices the duplication? Other people bring up simulation theory. If reality is rendered on demand, maybe duplicates slip in when code is reused. Two characters spawn from the same template. They behave similarly because the system didn't bother to vary them. This isn't proven or scientific, but it reflects a modern way of framing the feeling. The same unease people used to express through ghosts or spirits now gets channeled through programming metaphors. It's not about belief, it's about how you explain the break in logic. There's also the idea of behavioural mirroring. Humans often imitate each other subconsciously. In a group, people mirror posture, word choice, tone. It's how we build social trust. But when you see two people mirror each other perfectly without talking or even facing each other, it feels wrong. It feels automated. You may try to explain it away. Maybe they're twins. Maybe they know each other, but their faces don't register as related. They don't interact. They don't nod or exchange looks. They just exist, side by side, moving in sync. They leave the bus separately, heading in opposite directions. You stand there, unsure what to make of it. The mind stores this moment differently. You might forget the rest of your day, but not this. You remember how the bus smelled, what the light looked like, how quiet everything seemed. You recall the urge to speak and the decision to stay quiet. You replay the scene later, wondering what it meant. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe you just caught a rare alignment. But maybe it's a sign of how close we live to the edge of pattern and control. There are cases where this experience goes deeper. Someone reports seeing a woman on a subway holding a red purse, reading a specific book. Then, at the next stop, another woman boards. Same purse, same book, same coat. The first gets off, and the second sits in the same seat. The transition is seamless, as if the scene continued with a replacement. That kind of sequence feels designed, not random. Not paranormal, not staged, just too exact. When these stories are told, they often carry a tone of awe. Not fear, not wonder, just quiet disturbance. Something that looked human behaved like code. Something that should be random repeated with no logic. People walk away feeling like they caught the world reusing a frame, recycling a background character, slipping up in the details. And maybe that's all it is, a slip in perception. Your mind noticing more than usual, seeing the symmetry that usually hides behind noise. But the fact that it feels like a mistake tells you something. Our expectations of reality include imperfection. When you take the bus, you expect a range of colours, faces, gestures. You don't expect duplicates. When they appear, they force you to question what else might repeat unnoticed. What other patterns play out beneath the surface? What other copies move around you, wearing the same shoes, holding the same device, thinking the same thoughts? You saw two strangers. They never spoke. They never looked at you. They got off at different stops. But for a few minutes, they existed in the same frame, behaving like echoes. You don't know their names. You never will. But their presence lingers. Proof that something small, quiet, and unexplained passed through your day and left a mark. You're walking to work, same path you've taken for years. Your feet know the way without thinking. But today, at the corner where you always go left, you stop. Something feels off. No sound, no sign, just a pause. You look right instead. A quieter street, a little longer, less direct. You don't have a reason, but you turn. The sidewalk feels unfamiliar. Your pace slows. It's not like you're rushing or afraid. It just felt like the right thing to do. Later that day, you hear what happened. On your usual route, around the same time you would have passed through, there was a car crash, or a robbery, or a police chase, or some other event that would have stopped you, hurt you, or at least shaken you. You sit with that knowledge, wondering why you changed your path. You don't know. You just did. And now you can't shake the feeling that something, some part of you, knew. Unexplainable instincts like this happen more often than people admit. You change your seat on a plane. You delay leaving the house. You take a different train, cancel a meeting, stop walking just before something falls nearby. These aren't decisions you plan. They don't come from conscious logic. They come fast with little reasoning, but afterward they feel like the only possible choice. Psychology tries to explain it through the subconscious. Your brain processes thousands of details every second. Most of them never reach conscious awareness. Sounds, smells, body language, weather shifts, tiny signals you don't notice directly but that your mind still registers. When enough of those inputs combine into a pattern, your body might react before your thoughts catch up. A raised voice in the distance, a flash of brake lights ahead, the silence of a usually busy street. These cues don't scream danger, but they create tension beneath the surface. That tension becomes action, a step to the right, a slower pace, a new route. This is the basis of intuition, not magic, not prophecy, just high-speed pattern recognition that bypasses conscious thought. The brain takes in the world, compares it to past experience, and signals you to act. You feel it as a hunch or a shift in mood. The gut tightens. The mind says, try something else. If you listen, you change course. And sometimes, that simple act keeps you out of harm's way. But not every case is so clean. Some instincts have no clear sensory cue. You're at home, putting on shoes, and you stop. You feel heavy, unsettled, you sit back down, minutes pass. Then you hear about an accident at the intersection you were heading toward, or a person you were supposed to meet calls to say they're in trouble. You didn't hear anything, you didn't see anything, you just felt something. This is harder to explain. There's no sound, no motion, no flicker of movement that triggered the response. It's not reaction, it's anticipation. The mind isn't comparing present data, it's sensing something not yet visible. People call it instinct, but it behaves like warning. Some link it to emotion. If you're deeply connected to someone, a parent, a child, a close friend, you may pick up on changes in their energy. You don't know they're scared or in danger, but you feel suddenly uneasy. You call, and they say they were just in a crash or a fight or some intense moment. That connection isn't visible, but it's felt, not provable, but consistent enough to raise questions. There are studies about this. In one experiment, subjects were shown a series of images, some neutral, some disturbing. Their bodies often reacted before the disturbing image appeared. Heart rates increased, skin conductance changed, as if the body sensed the emotional weight of a picture before it was shown. Skeptics say it's coincidence. Others say it's proof that the subconscious can anticipate events by milliseconds, maybe more, but real-life examples feel stronger. A woman feels an overwhelming urge to pull over her car. No reason, just a strong sense of stop. A minute later, a truck runs a red light at the intersection ahead. If she had kept driving, she would have been there. A man misses his usual train. Nothing unusual, just decided to take the next one. He later finds out the first train was delayed for hours due to a fire. He didn't know anything was wrong, he just felt off. Some people treat these instincts as spiritual. They believe in guardian forces, call them ancestors, angels, the universe, that offer subtle nudges, a whisper, a push, a quiet thought that says, wait, or go now. There's no proof, but the effect is real. The route changed. The person avoided danger. Something interfered with routine, and the result was safety. Others describe it as timing. Life moving around you with invisible gears. You shift slightly, and the machinery of cause and effect slides past. If you had left a minute earlier, you would have been in the wrong place. But you forgot your keys, spilled your coffee, or paused to grab a jacket. You were delayed, annoyed maybe, but safe. And later, you realize the delay was the gift. The human mind resists this idea. We like control. We like to believe choices are deliberate, but instinct doesn't ask for permission. It acts. You can ignore it. Many do, and sometimes that's fine. Nothing happens. But other times, ignoring it leads to discomfort or danger. You look back and say, I knew I shouldn't have gone. Instinct is not perfect. It's not always right. But when it hits hard. It doesn't explain itself. It just moves you. A turn of the wheel, a skipped event, a missed flight, a glance backward that keeps you from stepping into traffic. And when you find out what almost happened, the hairs rise on your arms. Not because you believe in fate, but because you listened to something that came from nowhere, and it saved you. You don't talk about it much, you might mention it in passing. Funny thing, I almost took my usual route today, but I didn't. You downplay it. People nod and move on, but inside the feeling lingers, a quiet echo, a sense that the world nudged you slightly and you heard it. No drama, no spotlight, just a small, invisible decision that made all the difference. You're crossing a plaza or walking through a train station. Dozens of people move in different directions. You're watching the flow of strangers until you notice something strange. A small group, maybe 3 or 4 people, are walking in perfect rhythm. Same pace, same stride. Their steps hit the ground at the same time, They sway the same way, turn at the same moment. It's not just one or two coincidences, it's full-body synchronicity. They aren't talking, they aren't together, no eye contact, no interaction. They just move as one. You keep watching. They move through the crowd like a silent formation. It's not military, it's not performance art. They're just ordinary people. Backpacks, headphones, hands in pockets. But their movements match with unnatural precision. You feel like you're watching a glitch, a pattern that shouldn't be there. Then one of them stops to check their phone. The rest keep going. The spell breaks. The moment passes. The people separate. You're left standing there, wondering what you just saw. This isn't a hallucination. It's real. It happens more than you'd expect, and it always feels off. Not frightening, not dramatic, just wrong in a way you can't explain. There are simple explanations up to a point. Humans mirror each other. When people walk together, even without talking, their brains naturally sync movement. It's an old evolutionary behavior. In a group, synchronization builds trust and safety. It's how soldiers march. It's how dancers move together. But that's among people who know each other or have rehearsed. Strangers with no awareness of each other usually don't stay in sync for long. Still, some of it happens automatically. When people walk side by side, their gait often aligns. Not perfectly, but close enough that the rhythm matches. Studies show this happens even between strangers. It's called spontaneous interpersonal coordination. It's most likely when two or more people are walking the same direction, at the same pace, with a shared goal or destination, a hallway, a crosswalk, a station platform, but most of the time, small differences remain. One person drifts ahead, one slows down. Someone pulls out a phone or adjusts a bag. The rhythm breaks. You notice when it breaks because it wasn't perfect to begin with. But when it is perfect, when multiple people walk not just at the same pace, but in mirrored posture, stride, breathing, it crosses a line. It stops looking natural. It starts looking scripted. That's where the unease comes in. You know people don't walk like that, not unless they're trained to. You start watching more closely. Are they part of a group? Are they performers, actors, tourists? But there's no shared detail, no matching outfits, no similar age, no visual cue that links them. They just look like people, normal people, doing something abnormal. There are stories like this from all over. A man in New York watches three strangers approach an intersection. They're spaced evenly apart, but they walk in lockstep. Their left feet hit the curb together, they all pause at the light, then they all step forward, still perfectly timed without looking at each other. Or someone at an airport sees two women walking side by side but clearly unconnected. Same height, same coat colour, same pace. Both checking their phones at the same time, slowing at the same gait, turning at the same second, then diverging without ever acknowledging each other. As if they followed a script only they could see. It's not always two or three people, sometimes it's more. In crowded cities you can spot lines of pedestrians flowing through intersections, all stepping onto the curb with military timing. It doesn't happen every day, but when it does it stands out. So what's behind it? One theory points to entrainment. That's when independent systems sync their rhythm after enough exposure to a shared beat. Fireflies blink together, heartbeats adjust during group meditation. Humans are no different. Our bodies can adjust to others without thinking. If you're walking in a crowd, your brain may start matching the pace of the people beside you. You don't notice it, it just happens. But entrainment usually leads to partial alignment. What people describe in these moments goes further. It's not just step syncing, it's full body mirroring. Left hand swings when the left foot moves. Head tilt matches. Blink rate even seems to align. That level of detail crosses out the casual explanation. Then there's the idea of social scripts. People in public spaces often follow the same rules without realizing it. Stay to the right. Avoid eye contact. Keep a steady pace. Don't stop in the middle. In high traffic areas, these unwritten rules get enforced by pressure. If you're surrounded by others, you adjust your movement to fit in. That can lead to large-scale behavioural sync. But again, the effect is usually loose. It doesn't explain why 4 strangers would lift their arms at the same second to scratch their faces or check their watches. Some reach for deeper explanations. Simulation theory surfaces here too. If the world is a kind of render and background characters, people you don't interact with, follow preset patterns, then sometimes those patterns might loop. They repeat movements. They walk in the same cycle. If something delays the update, if the simulation lags, you might catch a moment where 2 or more background figures do the same thing, with no variation. That theory isn't scientific. It doesn't need to be. What matters is the feeling it reflects, the sense that something's wrong with the texture of the moment. You don't feel fear. You feel awareness, that what you're watching isn't as organic as it appears. People rarely talk about these moments afterward. If they mention it, it's usually casual. That was weird. They don't want to seem paranoid, but the moment doesn't leave. You remember the sound of their footsteps, the way they turn their heads, the precision, the quiet. And when you walk away, you glance over your shoulder, just to check, just to see if someone else is walking the same way. Same foot, same swing, same pace. And when you see it again, even for a second, you don't say anything. You just keep walking, because you're not sure what you'd even call it. You're walking through a crowded street. You glance across the road, and for a second, you stop. There's someone standing by a bus stop, or stepping out of a store, who looks exactly like your friend. Not just a general resemblance. Same haircut, same face shape, same posture, even the same jacket they wore last week. You raise your hand, about to wave, then pause. Something feels off. The person isn't reacting. They aren't looking at you. They're just standing there, calm, unaware. You stare a little longer. It's not them. The resemblance is too close to ignore. This isn't someone who vaguely reminds you of a cousin or someone from school. This person is nearly identical. You check again. Maybe you're mistaken, but your gut tells you otherwise. You walk away feeling unsettled. Later, you mention it to the friend you thought you saw. They were nowhere near that location. They didn't wear that jacket today. They weren't in town at all. The copy you saw wasn't just similar, it was exact. And they don't have a twin. These are doppelgänger encounters, moments where you see someone who looks exactly like someone else, or even exactly like you. Sometimes you recognize the resemblance instantly. Other times it hits a few moments later, when the face or expression comes back to you in pieces. Some people laugh these off. Everyone has a twin somewhere. But when it happens to you, it doesn't feel like a funny coincidence. It feels precise, calculated, even staged. You start to wonder how 2 unrelated people could look that much alike. Same eyes, same hair, same way of holding a coffee cup or walking across a room. Sometimes the encounter is brief, a passing glance on a train platform, a figure across a cafe. But other times it's longer. You might end up walking behind the person for blocks, watching the back of their head, their shoulders, the shape of their ears. You might even circle around to try and catch their face again. Part of you needs to confirm it's not who you think it is. Another part almost wants it to be. There are also cases where you see someone who looks exactly like you. Not just in a mirror, not just in photos, in real life. A stranger walking your same pace, wearing a jacket you own, with your build, your hair, your nose, your way of glancing sideways. You don't know whether to approach them. Some people do, others freeze. The feeling of seeing yourself, out in the world separate from your body, doesn't register as normal. It rattles your sense of identity. There's no single explanation for doppelganger encounters. From a scientific view, human features fall into common patterns. Billions of people on Earth means billions of combinations, but not all combinations are used. Most people's faces follow a few key types: certain eye distances, jaw angles, cheekbone heights. Add to that common hairstyles, clothing trends, and expressions, and it's statistically likely that you'll eventually see someone who looks like someone else. There are documented cases of people meeting their lookalikes, strangers who resemble each other closely enough to be mistaken for siblings or twins. Some of them go viral online. People post side-by-side pictures, often shocked by the similarity. When geneticists study them, they find that while these people aren't related, they often share similar clusters in facial geometry. The human brain is also wired to recognise faces quickly, so we spot likenesses fast and respond to them strongly. But that explanation doesn't fully satisfy the feeling people describe. A true doppelganger encounter doesn't just look like someone, it feels like them. You sense their presence before your mind catches up. The posture, the energy, the stillness, it matches. And it's that emotional accuracy that makes the event stick. It's not just, he looks like John, it's, I saw John, but it wasn't John. Some people connect these moments to psychological projection. You miss someone, or you're thinking about them, and your brain temporarily overlays their image onto someone nearby. You interpret a stranger's features as familiar. You'll need to see someone shapes what you see. That can happen. But it doesn't explain the cases where multiple people agree on the resemblance, or when photos confirm how accurate the match really was. There are stranger examples. A woman visits a city she's never been to and walks into a bookstore. Behind the counter is someone who looks exactly like her childhood friend from another country. Not similar. Identical. She doesn't say anything, just leaves. Later she calls the friend. The friend has no connection to the city and wasn't travelling. The woman spends days trying to find the bookstore again. She can't. She walks the streets. It's not there. Other stories take on a surreal tone. A man sits at a bar and notices someone at the far end who looks exactly like him. Same clothes, same face, same watch. He tries to get the bartender's attention, but when he looks back, the person is gone. He asks around. No one saw the other man, just him. Some cultures treat doppelgangers with suspicion. In German folklore, the word means double walker, a shadow self. Seeing your doppelganger was said to be an omen, especially if it didn't acknowledge you. In other traditions, a doppelganger was a spirit copy, a ghost that mirrored the living. In some beliefs, it was said to appear before death, as a warning or as a sign of reality thinning. Even in modern times, people feel uneasy after these experiences, not because of any belief in curses, but because it breaks something. You expect people to be unique. Faces, voices, presence. Those things are supposed to be personal. When they repeat, especially perfectly, it challenges your assumptions. Some link it to simulation theory again. If the world is rendered with limitations, like a game, then perhaps only so many character models exist. You, your friends, your neighbours, all drawn from a limited set. Occasionally the system reuses a face. You weren't meant to see both copies at once, but you did. And now the illusion feels thinner. Whether or not that's true, the impact is real. People remember these moments for years. They remember the face, the clothes, the moment of confusion. Sometimes they take a photo, sometimes they don't get the chance. But the encounter stays sharp, not just visually, but emotionally. Because you didn't just see someone, you saw someone who shouldn't have been there, or someone who should have been, but wasn't. Either way, the world felt duplicated, and you were the only one who noticed. You're driving through a city at rush hour, red light up ahead, cars packed in every direction, tail lights glowing, horns here and there. You glance at the time, already a few minutes late. You scan the scene, 6 cars in front of you, 3 on your right, a full line wrapping behind. A bus idles at the corner. People cross the intersection slowly. You're boxed in. Then the light turns green. The cars move slowly at first. One by one they roll forward. You follow, left turn, then straight ahead. Another light. And that's when it hits you. The road ahead is empty. Not just like traffic. Empty. The 4-lane road that's usually a crawl at this hour is clear. No brake lights, no bumpers, no headlights in the rearview mirror. The cars that were all around you seconds ago? Gone. No sign of them in your lane, behind you, or even in the distance. Just stillness. You glance to your right. No cars parked, no traffic merging. You check your mirror again. Clean, wide open. It feels like a reset, like the scene changed behind your back. You keep driving, half expecting the missing traffic to catch up, but it doesn't. You pass intersections that should be crowded. Nothing. The freeway ramp that's always clogged is wide open. The usual clusters of cars at the mall entrance are missing. You feel a strange calm, and then confusion. Where did everyone go? This isn't a one-off. People describe it all the time. They hit a congested spot, then find themselves surrounded by silence moments later. No detour signs, no mass exits, just a crowd that evaporated without explanation. There are practical theories, of course. One is synchronization. At major intersections, light cycles can release large groups of cars all at once. If you catch the tail end of that release, you move forward while the main pack speeds off ahead. If you don't accelerate at the same pace, or if you take one turn while the rest go straight, you can find yourself alone. The main group is now blocks away. You're left in a pocket of space. But that only explains part of it. These moments feel more extreme. The time gap is too short. You don't just fall behind, you lose track of 50 or 100 vehicles in a matter of seconds. You check for possible side streets where the cars might have turned off, but there are none. You check for a road closure, a police detour, a crash, nothing. The layout didn't change. The road should still be full. It isn't. Another possibility is blind spots in perception. When you're focused on the traffic around you, you're not scanning the whole picture. Your attention narrows. When that pressure lifts, when the cars disappear, you become aware of how empty it feels. The contrast makes it sharper. But again, the intensity of the shift defies normal transitions. Some people describe more jarring versions. A driver sits at a stoplight in a line of 30 or 40 cars. Light turns green. They creep forward. They check their phone at the next red light, just for a second. Then they look up, and they're alone. Everyone is gone. No noise, no engine hum, just silence and space. They blink, shake their head, and keep going. The cars never reappear. Others tell of being stuck in thick traffic, then taking a left, any left, and the entire world empties, like crossing through an invisible gate. The noise behind vanishes. The road opens, and even the air feels different. Thinner, lighter. It's not always just roads either. People report walking through crowded parks or malls, only to round a corner and find themselves totally alone. No footsteps, no sound. Like stepping into a paused version of reality, these experiences raise deeper questions. If you didn't see the cars disappear, where did they go? You didn't see them turn off. You didn't see them pass ahead. They just weren't there anymore. It feels like watching a video glitch. Frames missing, transitions skipped. Simulation theory comes up again. If the world is rendered based on attention and proximity, maybe the cars weren't needed once you stopped focusing on them. They cleared out to save processing power. The system reloaded the scene with fewer details. That might sound far-fetched, but it captures the feeling of the moment, the sense that what should be happening just isn't. There's also the possibility of a perceptual gap, a moment when your awareness flickers and the scene resets around you. You were focused on the light, the motion, the turn, and in that flicker, something changed. You look back, and the past few seconds don't line up. The scene ahead doesn't match what should logically follow, but no one else notices, no one reacts, because for them, nothing broke. Some drivers experience the reverse. They travel for miles on an empty road, no other cars in sight. Then suddenly a full traffic jam appears out of nowhere. No warning, no build-up, like the crowd just dropped in. They ask, where did these cars come from? They weren't behind me. They weren't on the ramps. There were no signs. But now they're everywhere. People describe these moments with quiet unease. It's not fear, just the subtle feeling that something small but crucial didn't add up. The kind of feeling you get when a word you've used your whole life suddenly looks misspelled, or when you hear your own voice on a recording and don't recognize it. You're aware for a second that what you usually trust, vision, sound, timing, can slip. And maybe that's why traffic glitches leave such a strong impression. Roads are predictable, lights change, people follow rules, patterns repeat. When those patterns break without reason, the illusion of control cracks. You don't feel danger, you feel interruption, a shift. A moment where reality didn't behave the way it usually does. You keep driving. The silence lingers. You glance in the mirror again. Still no one behind you. The sky hasn't changed. The signs are the same. But the world feels a little different. Like you crossed some invisible line and didn't notice until it was already too late to go back. You're sitting alone at your desk. Your phone is across the room, screen dark. You haven't touched it for an hour. Suddenly the screen lights up. Not a notification, not a call. The messaging app opens. You watch as letters appear on the screen, one by one. Not full words, not autocorrect. Just random keystrokes, jumbled characters, like someone is typing from inside the phone. You walk over and pick it up, the app closes itself. The home screen returns to normal. You press the power button, everything works. No new updates, no background apps, just silence again. Later that night your computer freezes. Then the screen flickers. White lines, black patches, then a full shutdown. You didn't press anything. You weren't using a demanding program, just typing an email. The fans stop. The light on the power button goes dead. You try to turn it on again. Nothing. You step away. 10 minutes later, it powers back on by itself. These aren't rare events. People experience them every day. A Bluetooth speaker turns on by itself in the middle of the night. A TV changes channels when no one's holding the remote. An old digital clock resets to 12:00 with no power outage. A smart assistant speaks without being asked. You walk past a tablet and the screen lights up with a search bar already filled. The first instinct is to explain. A bad connection, a faulty cable, a software bug. These are all valid possibilities. Technology is built on fragile systems. Code, circuits, power supply, timing. One bad chip or corrupted file can throw everything off. A loose cable can create ghost input. Static build-up can trigger touchscreen behavior. That's the practical side. But the experience still feels wrong. Because sometimes the glitches don't follow logic. You're holding your phone, you watch the screen shake just slightly, like it's reacting to input. But you're not touching it. Then the camera opens, then it closes, then the flashlight turns on, you restart the phone. It works fine for days, then it happens again. Same behavior, no pattern, no warning. Other times the glitch seems to know. You type a message and the screen freezes for half a second, just long enough to make you pause. Then a different message appears. Words you didn't type, still in your tone, your voice, your phrasing, but you know you didn't write them. You delete the text, it doesn't happen again, but it stays with you. People who work in tech will say this is just the nature of complex systems. Computers don't understand meaning. They follow code. If that code loops, crashes, or collides with other processes, unpredictable things happen. It's not personal. It's not deliberate. But when it happens often, especially across multiple devices, you start to wonder if it really is random. There's something unsettling about watching a machine behave in a way you can't trace, not fail, not crash, but act, as if it has intent. A tablet that scrolls a document by itself, a smart TV that shows a program you've never watched, a laptop cursor that drifts across the screen slowly like someone's guiding it. Most people shrug these things off. They call them bugs, glitches, ghost touches, and most of the time that's what they are. Electrical interference, software conflicts, poor updates, sometimes malware, sometimes a faulty sensor. You reset the device, run diagnostics, and carry on. But then it happens again, this time on a different device. Your phone restarts while it's sitting untouched. Your smartwatch buzzes a phantom alert. Your Bluetooth headphones disconnect in the middle of a song, then reconnect a second later. These aren't big failures, they're small ruptures in the expected behaviour. And what makes them strange isn't the failure, it's the return to normal. Everything works again. Nothing is broken. But the memory of the glitch lingers. Some people describe these moments as mechanical déjà vu. You've seen this exact glitch before. You know what the screen will do next. You predict the error message before it appears. It's not because you've memorized the system. It's something else, like you've already lived through this crash, this flicker, this freeze. Then there are moments when the behavior gets personal. You say something out loud and your phone screen lights up. Not with a voice command, just a silent acknowledgement. You open a document and a section you weren't reading starts to highlight itself. You tell yourself it's lag, bad touch response, but your gut says otherwise. There are entire threads online dedicated to this. People sharing stories of devices that seem to watch, smart assistants that respond to unspoken questions, phones that display notifications that disappear when tapped, apps that open and close at specific hours with no timers set. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it pulls you out of the usual rhythm. Technology becomes unpredictable. There are scientific efforts to understand what causes this. Engineers talk about phantom inputs, capacitive noise, data corruption. Phones that heat up can send false touch signals. Cheap components can short. Screen protectors can trigger pressure points. Software conflicts between apps can produce odd visual bugs. But none of these fully explain the moments where the behavior seems deliberate, coordinated, and maybe that's the problem. Machines aren't supposed to behave as if. They're supposed to respond to input and return output. When they start doing things you didn't request, and then stop again without explanation, you lose trust. Not in the machine, in your sense of order. It doesn't take much. A few keystrokes appearing on their own, a screen that won't stay off, an app that opens by itself at 3 a.m. These aren't horror stories, they're moments of interruption. They challenge your belief that you're the one driving the interaction. You turn off the screen, you check your settings, you run the updates, everything looks fine. But next time, you hesitate before setting the phone down. You glance at it a little longer, just to see if it moves again. You wake up unsettled. The dream was intense, unlike the usual fragments you forget by breakfast. You were in a tall building. The hallways were dark. The air felt wrong. You walked past closed doors, one after another, until you reached a room with a flickering light and a single chair in the middle. Someone stood beside it, but their face stayed in shadow. You didn't recognize the voice when they spoke, but you remember what they said. You didn't write it down, but you remember the tone. It felt important. Later that morning you're talking to a friend. They look tired. You ask if they slept well. They say, "Not really. Strange dream last night." Then they describe the same hallway, same flickering light, same chair. They say they felt watched. You stare at them, waiting for a clue that they're joking. But they're serious. They dreamed it too. The same setting, the same figure, the same uneasy feeling. You didn't tell them anything about your dream, and they didn't describe it in vague pieces. They knew the layout, the colours, the sequence. That's what makes it hard to explain. Shared dreams aren't common, but they happen often enough to be reported again and again. Two people, close friends, siblings, couples, even strangers, wake up with memories of the same dream setting or story. Not just the same emotion, the same place, the same details, sometimes even the same dialogue. When it happens, it leaves both people quiet. You don't expect private mental events to overlap. Dreams are supposed to be personal. When they aren't, it makes you rethink what dreaming actually is. Psychology and neuroscience offer a few possible explanations. The most basic is shared stimulus. If two people experience the same events during the day, same stress, same conversations, same media input, Their brains might build dreams from the same raw materials. If you both watched a movie set in a hospital and talked about illness before bed, it's no surprise that you might both dream about sterile rooms and fluorescent lights. The themes are shared, so the imagery lines up. But that doesn't explain the dreams with settings no one remembers discussing. Dreams where both people describe a strange city, a massive staircase, a ruined church, or a specific colour of sky they've never seen in waking life. These aren't pulled from common TV shows or recent conversations. They arrive from nowhere and land in two separate minds at once. Another possibility is suggestion. One person dreams vividly and tells the other. The second person, consciously or not, internalizes the details. The next night, they dream something similar, shaped by the conversation. Memory distortion fills in the rest. Later, they both believe the dream happened simultaneously, but this only explains some cases. There are reports where both people have the dream the same night and share it before either has described it to the other. That's when things get harder to dismiss. The brain is a pattern engine. It wants to find matches. So it's possible that shared dreams happen more often in vague ways. Similar feelings, moods, fragments, and only stand out when the overlap is unusually precise. But even then, the effect is startling. Two people don't expect to visit the same non-existent town, talk to the same dream character, or walk down the same beach that doesn't exist in real life. There are studies on this, but they're difficult to conduct. Dreams are subjective, fragile, and easily altered by recall. The more you try to pin them down, the more they change. But researchers have found some evidence that dreamers can synchronize in limited ways, especially when sleeping near each other. In lab experiments, people exposed to the same sounds or smells at night sometimes report related dream content. But even those studies don't produce the fully formed, shared experiences people describe in real life. Some people take a different approach. They treat shared dreams as evidence that dreaming might not be entirely internal. Maybe dreams are more like spaces than stories. Not personal films, but shared environments the mind visits. In this model, the dream is a place your mind enters, and sometimes someone else enters it too. Not metaphorically, literally. Their consciousness overlaps with yours in that space. You don't just dream the same thing, you dream together. There's no science behind this, no way to measure it. But the idea has deep roots. Indigenous cultures around the world speak of dream realms, places where souls gather, where ancestors teach, where knowledge passes across bodies and time. In those views, dreams are not random firings of the brain, they're territories. When people report shared dreams, they're not anomalies. They're travellers who crossed paths. Others suggest telepathy, mind-to-mind communication during sleep. If dreaming lowers the noise of waking thought, maybe it opens channels we don't usually notice. That's speculative. There's no verified case of telepathy under lab conditions. But dreams don't follow the usual rules of space and time. They bend them, they erase them. So when two minds dream in sync, the usual boundaries don't apply. It doesn't have to be mystical. There are smaller ways shared dreams happen. Couples who've lived together for years sometimes report dreaming the same setting over and over. A recurring house, an imaginary park, a subway that doesn't exist. These dream spaces evolve over time. The partners recognize them. They talk about them. The next time the dream appears, they both visit it again. No planning, no control. It just happens. Some people keep dream journals and spot the patterns later. A friend writes about a dream in a dark forest with blue lights. Days later, another friend writes about the same forest, same lights, same strange symbols carved into the trees. Neither one talked about it beforehand. They were on opposite sides of the country. The effect doesn't always involve people who know each other. In rare cases, strangers online describe nearly identical dreams. Strange buildings with endless staircases, hotels where every floor is a different season, elevators that lead to nowhere, or masked figures that appear at the same point in the story. They find each other later, online forums, message boards, and compare notes. Sometimes the details line up, not just in theme, in structure. The shared dream doesn't have to be frightening. Some are peaceful. A quiet mountain, a child's voice, a room full of clocks all ticking together. Two people wake up and realise they were both there, even if only for a minute. They didn't control it. They didn't plan it. But for a moment their minds touch the same shape. And when that happens, the world feels slightly larger. Because if dreams can overlap, if minds can land on the same page without speaking, then maybe thought isn't as private as we believe. Maybe there are places, real or imagined, where we go not alone, but together. You sit down to write an email. Your fingers hover over the keyboard. You've done this thousands of times, but something's wrong. You stare at the keys. Your hands don't move. For a moment you forget where the letters are. Not just one or two. The whole layout feels foreign. You blink, shake your head, and try again. Slowly, the muscle memory returns. The words come back. But for those few seconds, something slipped. This isn't just forgetting a word, it's forgetting how to act. You know the task. You've done it every day. But your brain doesn't respond. You grip the steering wheel and can't remember how to reverse. You stand at the stove and suddenly don't know which way to turn the burner. You raise a pen and forget how to form a letter. It passes quickly, but the confusion lingers. People rarely talk about these moments. They feel too strange, too small to be serious, too unsettling to ignore. We expect to forget names or where we put our phone. But forgetting skills, forgetting actions, feels like a deeper kind of failure. Not memory, but function. Not information, but identity. Because you don't just remember how to type. You are someone who types. When that disappears, even for a second, it feels like a hole opening. The technical term for this is action slip, or task interruption error. It happens when your brain loses track of an automatic process. Most of what you do each day, walking, brushing your teeth, signing your name, runs on autopilot. These are procedural memories stored in a different part of the brain than facts or events. Once you've repeated a task enough times, it stops needing conscious attention. But when that automation breaks, it leaves you stranded. You try to shift gears, but your foot forgets where to go. You lift the phone to your ear and suddenly can't remember who you're calling. You reach for the door lock and can't tell if left is locked or unlocked. It's not that you've never known. It's that your mind slipped off the track for a moment. And in that moment, the habit became a puzzle. Stress makes this worse. So does fatigue. When your brain is overloaded, it can't keep all processes active. It drops some. The ones you think are safe, typing, driving, unlocking your phone, are stored deep. But even those can fade under pressure. You're thinking about a deadline, a conversation, a sound outside. You reach for the next word and your fingers don't follow. Distraction is another trigger. You start making coffee, then check a notification. When you come back, you can't remember what step you were on. Did you add the grounds already? Did you turn on the machine? You stare at the pot like it's a stranger. Not because you forgot coffee, but because the act disconnected from your awareness. There's also something called jamais vu, the opposite of déjà vu. It's when something familiar suddenly feels unfamiliar. You write a word like the, and it looks wrong. You say a phrase you've said for years and it sounds strange. That can expand into physical action. You reach to tie your shoes and the motion feels new. You know how. You've done it your whole life. But it's like watching yourself through someone else's eyes. Some people experience this with speech. You're mid-sentence, and your tongue won't shape the word. It's not a stutter. It's not nerves. It's like the engine stalled. The thought is there. The mouth is ready. But the bridge between them collapsed. Then a second later it's back. But that second feels longer than it is. Others lose rhythm in the middle of a song they've played for years. A pianist sits down, starts the piece and forgets what comes next. Not because they don't know it, but because the pattern dropped. Their hands pause. The notes go silent. They restart from the top, and it's all there. But the moment in the middle, that hole, shakes them. Athletes describe this too. A runner forgets how to start a sprint. A gymnast stands still before a vault, unsure how to move. Not injured, not afraid, just blank. The body remembers, but the bridge to memory is gone. When it returns, it feels like waking from sleep. These moments aren't always caused by fatigue or stress. Sometimes they come in total calm. You're rested, you're focused. Then suddenly you don't remember how to unlock your own front door. You try one key, then another. You look at the handle. Something doesn't line up. You pause, breathe, try again. This time, it works. But you feel disoriented, like the past few seconds happened in a different version of your life. It doesn't mean something is wrong. The brain is complex. It stores different types of memory in different places. Facts in one, movements in another, emotion in a third. When you act automatically, your conscious mind steps aside. But sometimes it tries to take control mid-task. That's when things jam. The act of thinking about the action breaks the action itself. Think of riding a bike. Once you know how, you don't think about balance, you just ride. But if someone asks, "How are you staying upright right now?" and you try to explain it while pedaling, you might wobble. The focus that helps in new tasks hurts in automatic ones. There's a name for this: overcorrection. The brain steps in when it's not needed. The system stalls. The more you try to remember the action, the more the muscle memory retreats. You type slower, you second-guess the pedals, you forget how to exit a parking garage. These aren't signs of decline, they're signs of how thin the surface of routine can be. Most of the time, your habits work without thought. But when that system stutters, you glimpse how much of your life depends on silent, invisible memory. Afterward, you go on, you finish the email, you complete the drive, you unlock the door, everything works. But part of you remembers the glitch, the break, the moment when a skill you trusted slipped through your fingers. And that's what stays with you. Not fear, not confusion, just the quiet realization that even the most familiar things can go missing for a second. Not lost, just misplaced, hidden under layers you usually don't need to see, until you do. You wake up and something is wrong, not with the room, not with the light or the temperature, with your position. You're lying across the bed sideways, not lengthwise. Your head is where your feet should be. Your arms are bent in a strange way. Your shoes are still on. You don't remember putting them back on. You don't remember falling asleep like this. You don't remember getting into bed like this at all. You sit up slowly, trying to piece it together. Did you lie down sideways? Did you come in and collapse without changing clothes? You replay last night in your head. The last thing you clearly remember is scrolling through your phone or watching something. Then a gap. Then now. Some people wake up not just turned around, but in another part of the room entirely. On the floor, at the foot of the bed, sitting upright in a chair, or on the couch in the next room, fully dressed, lights off, door closed. It doesn't feel like sleepwalking, it feels like teleporting, like something skipped. And what unsettles people most is the stillness. There's no sign of struggle, no scattered blankets, no overturned pillows. You just moved. Or were moved. Sleep is a vulnerable state. You give up control willingly. You close your eyes and trust that your body will stay put, that the morning will come, and you'll be where you left yourself. When you wake up out of place, fully dressed, sitting up, or in another part of the room, it breaks that contract. The moment isn't loud, it's quiet, but it carries weight. There are explanations, though not always satisfying ones. The most common is sleepwalking. It's not as dramatic as movies make it seem. Most sleepwalking is slow, simple, and hard to remember. You might get out of bed, sit in a different chair, and lie back down without waking. Or you might adjust your position during the night, roll to the edge, turn yourself sideways, tuck your feet under the pillows, and never know it happened. But even sleep specialists admit, not everyone who wakes up in the wrong position has a history of sleepwalking. And sleepwalking rarely explains things like wearing shoes, or having items placed neatly nearby, or finding yourself in a locked room you don't remember entering. Some blame micro-awakenings, brief moments during the night where the brain wakes up just long enough to adjust the body, move, or perform a small task. You might open your eyes, sit up, move your legs, even get out of bed and return, all while semi-conscious. The brain forgets the event. When you wake again hours later, it feels like you moved in your sleep. But from your point of view, there's a gap. You were in one place, now you're in another. That gap is what makes the moment feel strange. People describe it like a glitch. You fall asleep curled up but wake up flat on your back with your arms crossed. You fall asleep under the covers but wake up with the blanket folded at your feet. You fall asleep with your phone in hand and wake up with it on the windowsill across the room. You check for any sign that you got up. Nothing. No marks on the floor. No noise. Just the change. Sometimes it gets more extreme. A man falls asleep on the couch and wakes up in his car. Keys in the ignition. No memory of walking outside. No sign of forced entry. Everything else untouched. Another person lies down for a nap and wakes up on the floor beside the bed. Not bruised or uncomfortable, just placed there. They check for camera footage. No movement. No alert. Just the before and the after. Some report waking up upside down in their own bed. Feet on the pillow, head at the footboard. It sounds harmless, even funny, but it's not just position, it's the precision. The blanket still covering them perfectly. The pillow still under their head, just now at the wrong end. No tug marks, no sign of rolling or turning, like the bed rotated, not the person. Others say they woke up with their clothes inside out, or with socks missing and then found placed neatly beside the bed. Not tossed. Placed. Some find their shoes on, fully laced, and not dirty from walking, just on, as if they were never taken off. Sleep researchers sometimes chalk this up to parasomnias, abnormal movements or behaviours during sleep. But even they admit, not all parasomnias leave the person or the room undisturbed. Most involve restlessness, scattered sheets, signs of motion. These events feel different, too clean. People notice patterns. It often happens during stress, or after long periods of exhaustion, or during nights with no dreams remembered. Some link it to medications, but others have no triggers at all. They just wake up in the wrong place again and again, always calm, always intact, but always wrong. Then there's the possibility of memory lapses, the idea that the movement happened consciously, but the brain failed to store it. You got up, changed your position, maybe even change your clothes, and your mind didn't bother keeping a record. That could explain a lot. But it doesn't feel like a memory lapse. It feels like a timeline jump. Some take a different view. They suggest the mind doesn't just rest during sleep, it travels, and sometimes, on return, it lands slightly off. Not far, just enough to feel misaligned. Others say you entered a different layer of sleep or a different layer of the world, and returned to a slightly altered version. Not metaphysically, just practically. The same room, the same bed, but your body landed an inch to the left, or at the foot of the bed, or back in your shoes. These ideas can't be tested, but they match the feeling. Not panic, not confusion, just displacement. You know you didn't fall asleep like this, but you woke up here, so either something changed, or you did. You lie there, staring at the ceiling. You touch the laces of your shoes. You run your hand across the blanket. You try to remember the moment you moved. You can't. You try to remember anything. You can't. You get up, stretch, and move on. But the sense stays with you. And the next night, when you lie down again, you glance at your feet. You feel the shape of the pillow. You look at the door, the window, the edge of the mattress. You tell yourself it was nothing. But part of you is waiting to see where you'll wake up next. You look at your phone, it's 11:11. You're not checking for the time, just glancing. You open your laptop later, and the battery is at 33%. You pass a billboard with a phone number ending in 7777. You take a receipt from a coffee shop, and the total is $5.55. At first, you don't think much of it, but it keeps happening, day after day. Different places, different devices, same patterns. It's not just once in a while, it's frequent. too frequent to ignore. You stop chalking it up to coincidence, you start noticing it more. 2:22 when you happen to check the microwave. A train car marked 444. License plates with repeating numbers that seem to follow you. You start paying attention, and the more you pay attention, the more they show up. Some people call these angel numbers, others call them synchronicities. Some don't label them at all. They just notice, then keep noticing. It's not about believing in numerology or signs. It's about pattern recognition. Something is repeating, and you're the only one who seems to notice how often. Psychologists have a name for this kind of experience. It's called frequency illusion, also known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. It happens when you learn or notice something new, like a word, a car model, or a number pattern, and then you start seeing it everywhere. The pattern didn't increase, your awareness did. Your brain is built for this. It's a pattern detection machine. You see thousands of numbers every day, on screens, clocks, signs, receipts, temperature readings, page counts. But you only remember the ones that stand out. Repeating numbers are symmetrical, tidy, and easy to recall. That makes them stick. You don't remember the time when it was 7:32 or 3:19, but 11:11, you remember that. Still, there are moments when the frequency illusion theory doesn't fully explain the feeling. Some people report seeing the same number at the same time every day, without meaning to. They stop checking the clock at random and still catch 4:44 or 1:11. They change time zones or daily routines, but the patterns follow. And it's not just on clocks. They notice patterns in prices, street addresses, even page numbers in books they didn't choose. That's when the experience starts to feel less like randomness and more like design. Not a message, necessarily. Just something with shape. The numbers feel like markers, not telling you something new, but pointing to something already in motion. A shift in attention. A moment of pause. Some people assign meaning to specific numbers. They say 111 means alignment. 222 means balance. 333 means guidance. These meanings vary depending on which system you use. Numerology, spiritual symbolism, astrology. But you don't need a system to feel the pull of the pattern. You just need the repetition, the timing, the sense that something subtle is trying to catch your eye. And sometimes that's exactly what it does. It makes you pause. Mid-scroll, mid-sentence, mid-thought. You catch the pattern, and for a second, you stop. You check yourself. You wonder why it keeps happening. You look at your thoughts in that moment. What were you thinking just before the pattern showed up? What were you about to say, do, or decide? That pause alone is powerful. Whether or not the number means anything, it creates space. It marks the moment. You were distracted, and now you're not. You were drifting, and now you're aware. That may be all the pattern is doing, refocusing your attention. There are scientific studies on how the brain responds to symmetry and repetition. We find regular patterns soothing. Numbers like 1111, 333, or 777 feel stable. They create a kind of visual rhythm. In a world full of chaos and unpredictability, these patterns offer brief moments of order. Even if they're random, they feel intentional. People report seeing these numbers most often during periods of transition, when they're between jobs, starting a new relationship, ending one, moving, grieving, waiting for answers. In those moments, the numbers feel like anchors, not because they answer questions, but because they show up again and again. Something to hold on to. There's also a feedback loop. You notice the numbers, and then you look for them more. Not actively maybe, but your brain primes itself. It becomes sensitive to patterns, and once that loop begins, it strengthens itself. You train your mind to find order, and it does. That doesn't make the experience any less meaningful. Just because your brain is good at patterns doesn't mean the pattern is empty. Sometimes the point isn't what the number means, but what it does. It interrupts your automatic thinking. It slows you down. It pulls you out of whatever noise you were lost in. And maybe that's why people come back to these numbers again and again. Not because they predict the future, not because they hold secret codes, but because they remind you to look, to pay attention, to ask yourself what you're doing, where your mind is, what path you're on. You might keep seeing 4, 4, 4 every time you doubt yourself. You might notice 11, 1 when you're about to make a decision. You might look at your phone during a conversation and see 333. The number doesn't change the moment, but it marks it. And in marking it, it makes you more present. Some people ignore these patterns completely. Others follow them closely. Most sit somewhere in between. They don't worship numbers, but they notice them, and they remember how often they show up when something is about to change, or already has. You don't have to believe anything specific to notice repetition. You just have to be awake, present enough to say, there it is again. And maybe the number has no meaning, or maybe it's just a rhythm you're learning to hear, a subtle tick in the background, a low-frequency pulse that doesn't tell you what to do, but reminds you that you're still watching, still aware, still part of something larger than routine. You're washing dishes, your mind drifts. You start thinking about someone you haven't spoken to in weeks, an old friend maybe, or a cousin who usually only calls on birthdays. There's no reason to think of them now, no recent memory, no reminder. You dry your hands, walk to the other room, and your phone lights up. It's them calling. You stare at the screen for a second before answering. You think, I just thought of you. This happens to people all the time. You remember someone, and they text you minutes later. You get a strange urge to check on a friend, and as you reach for your phone, it rings. You look at a photo of someone from college, and then get an email from them that same afternoon. You weren't expecting it. You didn't plan it, but it lined up. Some people brush it off. Coincidence. Selective memory. You think of dozens of people every day. Eventually, one of them is bound to call. But that explanation doesn't sit well when the moment is too sharp. It's not just random thought. It's a specific name, a clear image, a sudden awareness. Sometimes it's paired with emotion, a sense that something's off, or that someone's about to say something important. Then the call comes in. Psychologists and statisticians usually start with probability. In a world of constant communication, timing overlaps. You remember the one match and forget the misses. That's called confirmation bias. You remember the one time you predicted the call and forget the 10 times you thought about someone and heard nothing. Over time, your brain builds a false pattern. That's the theory. But in practice, people describe something different. The memory isn't vague, it's strong and immediate. They weren't flipping through names in their mind. They were doing something else entirely. Driving, cooking, walking. When the person appeared in thought, unprompted. Not a list, just them. Then the phone rang. Same person, same moment. It doesn't just happen with friends or family. It can happen with people you rarely speak to. Someone you haven't seen in years. Someone who's never called before. That makes it hard to explain with routine or habit. You weren't due to hear from them. There was no scheduled call. They were just there, in your mind, and then on your screen. Some researchers have tried to test this. A few parapsychology labs conducted small-scale experiments on telepathy and precognition, often using controlled phone call trials. One person would think about calling. The other would record any mental impressions. Sometimes the results showed more accuracy than random chance. But the studies were too small or inconsistent to draw strong conclusions. Mainstream science doesn't accept the idea that people can sense each other's thoughts or future actions, but the experience itself doesn't require belief. It just happens. Some people chalk it up to emotional connection. You and the other person are close enough, family, longtime friends, romantic partners, that your emotional states influence each other unconsciously. If one of you is feeling lonely, upset, or excited, the other picks it up without realizing. That awareness turns into thought. You think about them, then they reach out. In that sense, it's not prediction. It's shared state. Others describe it as an energy thing, not in scientific terms, but in intuitive ones. You send out something when you think of someone, and they receive it without knowing why. The thought makes them pick up the phone. Or the reverse. They think of you and your mind catches the signal before the device does. There's also the possibility of subtle cues. Maybe you saw their name in a social media scroll even for a fraction of a second. Maybe a song reminded you of them. Maybe your phone logged their name while syncing contacts and the word flashed across your peripheral vision. You don't register the cue consciously, but the brain stores it. That silent input turns into a thought, and you mistake it for pure intuition. Still, those explanations don't cover the more extreme cases, like the person who wakes up from a dream about a friend crying, then receives a call from that friend minutes later, in tears. Or the person who hears a phone buzzing in a dream with a name attached, and wakes up to a call from that exact person. That kind of timing stretches coincidence. Some say it's a glitch in how we understand time. That thought doesn't follow a straight line. The call already exists in the near future, and the mind picks up on it early. Not because of a supernatural power, but because time isn't as rigid as we think. Memory, awareness, and intuition blend at the edges, and sometimes the signal comes before the source. Other people take the simulation angle. If reality's code, maybe there are shortcuts. The system prepares the incoming call by placing the person in your thoughts first. Like preloading a scene before it loads fully. It's not spiritual, it's procedural, but it still feels like knowing. Regardless of the model, psychological, emotional, energetic, or theoretical, the experience has the same shape. A quiet thought, a name, a face, a feeling, then a ring, a message, a connection. You don't know how, you just know it happened. Some people act on it. They reach out before the call arrives. "Hey, I was just thinking about you." The other person replies, "I was about to text you." It happens so often it becomes normal. They stop calling it strange. They start trusting the pattern. Others don't mention it. They see the call come in, answer it, and say nothing about the thought. But the sense of alignment lingers. The world feels a little more responsive, a little more stitched together. You put down the phone after the call, you sit in silence for a second. You think about how the thought came, uninvited, how it turned into a voice, and how it felt less like a surprise and more like recognition. You buy something new, a box of light bulbs, a kitchen gadget, a pack of batteries. You bring it home, take off the shrink wrap, slice open the cardboard, peel away the plastic seal, and inside, tucked between moulded foam or bubble wrap, you find a coin. Not a shiny new one, not something recently minted. It's dull, worn, from the 1970s, or earlier. It doesn't belong there. The packaging was sealed. The product was factory fresh. No signs of tampering. No openings, no loose flaps, no sign someone else handled it. You flip the coin over. It's real. A Izerkeling Ven Harom Negied, or a 1969 penny. You check again, maybe even search online to see if anyone else found one, but no one has, just you. It's not worth much, not rare, but that's not the point, it's out of place. You try to explain it. A manufacturing accident? Maybe someone at the factory dropped it in by mistake. But modern packaging lines are precise, automated. Machines handle almost everything. Items move from conveyor belts into plastic molds, then into cardboard, then into sealed boxes. Human hands don't usually come into contact with individual units, especially not long enough to drop in a decades-old coin. And even if it were human error, why that coin? Why an object that predates the product by 40 or 50 years? A stray screw or a packaging staple would make more sense. A personal item like a note or a sticker from another box. But this is a coin from a different era, a different system. Other people report stranger versions. Someone buys a brand new notebook and finds a Polaroid photo tucked between the pages. It's faded, curled at the edges, shows a scene from decades ago. Nothing creepy, just a backyard or a kitchen or two people standing in front of a car. But it's not staged. It's not printed on new paper. It's old, real. You can feel the age in the colour shift, in the softness of the photo stock. You'd swear it sat in someone's drawer for years. Or someone opens a sealed lamp box and finds an outdated instruction manual inside, written for a model that was discontinued years ago. Or they unbox a new phone case and find an old ticket stub folded underneath the plastic insert. Or a sealed board game contains a receipt from 1986. These aren't dramatic, they're small, quiet anomalies, but that's what makes them memorable. You expect the past to stay in the past. When it shows up in sealed packaging, it breaks your understanding of how time and process work. One common explanation is simple mislabeling. A return item got resealed and sold as new. Someone bought it before you, opened it, dropped something in, and returned it. Then the store put it back on the shelf, but in many of these cases the seal was untouched. Factory glue intact, tamper-proof tabs unbroken, shrink wrap still tight, and the object found isn't something that would fit in a customer's pocket. Not something you drop in casually, it's out of context. There's also the possibility of reused materials. Factories recycle. A company might have reused old storage bins or pallets from another site. In that case, maybe the coin or object stuck to the inside of a mould or tray and transferred into the packaging unnoticed. That's possible, but you'd expect more reports like this, more out-of-place debris. Yet the reports that do surface always involve old items that are too specific, too distinct, too pointed. What people describe is more targeted than random. It's not that they found a piece of plastic or a sticker from another product. They found something old inside something new. That pairing is what sticks. There's another layer when the object is not just old, but personally meaningful. Someone opens a sealed journal and finds a note in handwriting that resembles a grandparent's. Not exact, not verifiable, but close enough to trigger memory. Or a toy arrives in the mail, and inside is a coin from the year the owner was born. No mention of it in the product listing, no explanation, just there. Some people treat these objects as messages, not supernatural ones, just moments of alignment, a reminder, a prompt. They don't ask why it happened, they ask what it means. What were you thinking when you found it? What had you forgotten? What does that year or object connect to in your life? It's not about belief, it's about attention. The object shifts your focus, it interrupts routine, it makes you look closer. Others go further. They suggest these moments aren't errors, they're glitches, in the system, in the timeline, in whatever maintains consistency in the world around us. If you assume reality is mostly seamless, then these are the seams, a ripple, a skipped frame, a duplicated asset. If a 1973 coin shows up in a 2024 package, maybe something in the world reused data that shouldn't have crossed. That idea isn't scientific, but it mirrors the feeling, the sense that something slipped through. You don't feel fear, you feel pause. Not everything fits the pattern. Sometimes time folds just for a second and leaves behind a small object to prove it. You don't talk about it much. If you mention it, people offer the usual answers. Return error, manufacturing glitch, someone playing a prank. You nod, but none of it fits. You were there. You opened it yourself. You saw the seal break. You felt the gap before you even touched the object. You knew it was out of place. You keep the item. Not because it's valuable, because it happened. A 50-year-old coin found in a plastic shell with foam padding and a barcode dated last month. Nothing strange, nothing dramatic, just 2 points in time overlapping for a moment. Long enough for you to see. Long enough to make you wonder what else might be hiding in the layers between. You're in a crowd, maybe at a mall or walking down a busy street. Conversations buzz around you. Laughter, footsteps, car engines, music from a storefront. You're not paying close attention. Then you hear it, clear and direct, your name, spoken just above the noise. You turn instinctively, scanning faces. No one is looking at you. No one is talking to you. You stand there for a second, listening. Nothing follows. You walk on, unsettled. It doesn't just happen in crowds. Sometimes you hear it in quiet places. Home alone, No music, no background noise. You're in the kitchen or folding laundry. Then, behind you or from another room, your name. Spoken softly, not a whisper, not threatening, just your name. Familiar, like someone calling to get your attention. You walk to the hallway, check the door, look through a window, nothing. You replay it in your mind. You're sure you heard it. Not your thoughts, not imagined. It had tone, shape, the edge of a voice you can't place. These moments are common. People experience them in different places at different times, with the same reaction, pause, confusion, scanning for a speaker who isn't there. And the experience often feels personal. Your name isn't just a word, it's the sound your brain is trained to respond to. Even in a deep sleep, a parent will wake if their name is called. Even in noise, your brain picks it out. There's a scientific explanation for part of this. The phenomenon is called phantom hearing, or auditory pareidolia. Your brain constantly processes background sounds, fans, traffic, layers of distant conversation. It's wired to pick out patterns in that noise. If it catches fragments that resemble speech, it fills in the rest. And because your name is the word most tuned to your attention, your brain is more likely to shape random sound into that specific pattern. It's not a trick. It's your brain doing what it always does, finding meaning where it can. Crowds make this more likely. Dozens of voices layered together form unpredictable sounds. One voice says a word with a sharp K, another says something with a soft A. Together they blend into something that sounds like your name. You hear it, you look, it's not there. But your brain was doing what it's supposed to, staying alert, listening for signals. The same thing can happen when you're alone, especially when your environment has subtle sounds, pipes clicking, wind, electronics humming, the buzz of a refrigerator. These noises have rhythm. Your brain analyzes them for patterns. Once in a while it finds a shape close enough to speech. If you're not distracted or your thoughts are quiet, you might catch it. Some call this a form of auditory hallucination, but that term is misleading. It doesn't mean you're sick or imagining things. It just means your auditory cortex briefly interpreted sound without a source. It's a glitch in processing, not perception. You still heard something, it just wasn't what you thought. Stress and lack of sleep make this more common. When you're tired or anxious, your sensory filters wear thin. Your brain stays more alert than usual, constantly checking for threats or messages. That hyper-alertness can sharpen your awareness of sound and make you more likely to misinterpret it. A squeak becomes a word, a creak becomes a name. But not all experiences fit this model. Some people hear their name in total silence. No fan, no pipes, no overlap in sounds, just stillness. Then the voice comes, clear, direct, shaped like someone you know. Sometimes it's your mother's voice. Sometimes it's your own voice. Sometimes a voice you've never heard before, but it feels familiar. It speaks your name and nothing else. Not a command, not a message, just your name. There's no one nearby, no devices playing. You check your surroundings, everything is normal, but your body reacts, you freeze, the air feels different, and the name echoes in your mind like it came from somewhere outside you. That's when the experience becomes harder to explain. Some people call this a glitch in the auditory field, like your brain ran a piece of memory sound at the wrong moment. Others say it's a form of hypnagogic hallucination, which happens in the moments just before sleep. You're not dreaming, you're still conscious, but your senses loosen. You may hear knocking, footsteps, or voices, sometimes just your name. If you're lying in bed, half awake, and hear someone call you, that may be why. But what if you're wide awake, focused, in the middle of doing something else? That's where speculation begins. In folklore and superstition, hearing your name without a speaker is often seen as a sign. In some cultures, it's thought to mean someone is thinking of you. In others, it's treated as a warning not to answer. Because names in old traditions hold power. Calling someone's name wasn't just communication, it was connection. Even now, people sometimes hesitate to respond. They hear the name, freeze, wait. Instinct says, don't speak, don't answer. As if replying gives the voice permission to come closer. This isn't fear in the dramatic sense, it's a reflex. A sense that something is watching from just beyond your reach. Others think the experience is linked to memory, that hearing your name is your own mind reaching for attention. Like a hand tapping your shoulder from the inside. You've been distracted. You've ignored something. Your brain whispers your name to pull you back. It's not a voice from outside, it's a signal from within. Still, the most unsettling experiences are the ones that repeat. You hear your name once, you shrug it off. You hear it twice, you joke about it. But 3 times, 4, always in the same room, always when you're alone, then it starts to feel like a pattern, not a threat, just something that won't leave. And there's the strange comfort too. Some people say the voice calling their name feels protective, like someone checking in. Not a haunting, but a presence. Not a warning, but a reminder. You're not alone. Even when no one's there, you don't mention it often. It's hard to explain without sounding strange. But you remember the moment, the clarity of it, how real it felt, and how quickly it vanished. You keep listening, just in case it happens again. And when it does, you pause, glance over your shoulder, and ask yourself the same quiet question. Who just called me? 9 minutes. You sit there for a second, confused. You didn't skip any major turns. You didn't hit green lights all the way. There was no clear reason the drive felt faster. It didn't even feel rushed. It felt normal. But the numbers don't match. You made a 35-minute trip in less than 10. That shouldn't be possible. You try to write it off. Maybe your first-time check was wrong. Maybe your car clock is off. Maybe you misread your watch. But the feeling doesn't go away. Something didn't add up. Then it happens again. Not the same place, not the same day, but the same pattern. Sometimes it works in reverse. You glance at the time, 9:20 p.m. You sit down to check a few emails, answer a message, maybe scroll through something for a bit. When you look up, it's after midnight. You don't remember the hours passing. It felt like 20 minutes. You didn't zone out. You didn't fall asleep. You were conscious the whole time, just unaware of the stretch. It's not always a fast forward or a time skip, sometimes it's a loop. You walk into a store, the music playing seems familiar, a song from earlier, you walk past the same aisle. A kid in a red jacket walks by holding the same snack he held before. You check your phone, same minute as before, no notifications, no progress. For a moment it feels like everything repeated. Then the spell breaks, and time moves again. People experience these time loops in different ways, but the core feeling is the same. Discontinuity. Time didn't behave. The experience you had doesn't match the time you lost or gained. There are straightforward explanations for some of it. The brain processes time based on focus and memory. If you're highly focused, reading, playing music, writing, your internal clock slows down. You don't encode every second, you remember the highlights. That makes time feel short. On the other hand, if you're bored or anxious, your mind tracks more detail. Time stretches. But time loops don't always follow those rules. You weren't focused, you weren't distracted, you were alert, present, and the moment still felt wrong. There's a name for one version of this: time distortion. It happens under stress, in dreams, or during altered states of consciousness. For example, people in car accidents often report that time slowed down. A few seconds felt like minutes, every detail sharpened, but the stopwatch tells the truth. It was fast. The brain just stretched the moment. In other cases, time compresses. People driving long, familiar routes sometimes arrive with no memory of the trip. That's called highway hypnosis. You weren't asleep, you were just operating on autopilot. Your brain didn't encode the usual visual markers, so when you look back, the time seems missing. That might explain some short trips, but what about when the math doesn't work? You left the house at 4 o'clock. You arrived at 4:09. Google Maps says 28 minutes. You check traffic history, no anomalies. Your speed never went above the limit. And yet, here you are, 19 minutes unaccounted for. That's not memory distortion. That's an actual discrepancy. That's when the experience moves from psychological to uncanny. People call these time slips, not breakdowns in memory, but slips in the actual structure of time. You stepped into a section of road, or a hallway, or a space where time bent. You didn't move faster, time moved differently around you. The route didn't change, the duration did. It's hard to test because time keeps moving. You can't rewind and remeasure. But you remember how it felt, how smooth it was, how nothing stood out. And that's what makes it strange. If something had happened, you could explain the shift. But the moment was quiet, too quiet. There are rare cases where multiple people experience it together. Two people leave work at the same time, take the same route, drive the same speed. One arrives 15 minutes earlier. No stops, no detours, just a gap. They compare stories, nothing unusual. But one of them lost time, or gained it. You see this in missing time reports too, often linked to high strangeness events. A person goes for a walk, hears a strange noise or sees a strange light, and finds themselves somewhere else with no memory of how they got there. They check the clock. Hours have passed, but they're not tired. They're not hungry. Their watch stopped working during the gap. When it starts again, the timeline resumes. They never know what happened in between. That's the extreme end of the experience. Most loops are smaller. A few minutes, a sense of repetition. A room that seems too still. A moment that repeats itself. A store that looks exactly like it did the last time you visited, down to the position of every customer. You think, didn't I just do this? Sometimes the repetition is exact. You walk down a hall, hear a door creak, smell something faint, soap, food, something warm. You reach the end, turn a corner, and everything repeats. Same creak, same smell, same light. Not similar, identical. For a second you freeze. It's not déjà vu, it's a loop. Then something breaks it. A sneeze, a door slam, a voice. The pattern ends, but you remember it. These moments don't fit cleanly into your memory. You try to explain them, but the words don't line up. You know what you experienced, but you can't prove it. And maybe that's the point. Time is supposed to be stable, linear, predictable. When it slips, forward, backward, or in circles, you lose something deeper than minutes. You lose your grip on sequence. You question whether the clock is tracking reality, or just a version of it. You still arrive on time, you still meet the deadline, but part of you knows the way you got there wasn't normal. You travelled the usual route, but something inside it changed. Something bent, quietly, while you weren't looking, and you wonder if it could happen again, or already has. Then, just for a moment, something feels off. You turn your head slightly and the reflection hesitates, or moves faster than you. You blink and it seems like your mirrored self blinked first. Your hand shifts, but the image doesn't match the movement exactly. You freeze, your body stills, you stare into your own eyes, waiting for the delay again. But now, everything's back to normal. Your reflection follows your every move like it always has. You shake your head and tell yourself it was nothing. Maybe you looked away for a split second. Maybe you imagined it. Maybe your mind filled in a gap in motion. But the feeling lingers. I didn't move like that. People describe this mirror mismatch in many different ways. Some say the reflection was half second late. Others say it moved too early, or in an unexpected way. A few say the reflection's expression changed independently. Subtle shifts in mouth or eyebrows that didn't match their real face. Some describe the reflection looking deeper, like the eyes behind the glass were watching rather than reflecting. It's a brief moment, a flicker, but it's enough to unsettle you. The most grounded explanation is neurological. Your brain constantly predicts your body's movement. This prediction helps coordinate vision and muscle control. It also means you don't always see in real time. The brain filters, smooths, and edits your perception. If that prediction is off due to fatigue, distraction, or small visual distortions, you might feel a delay that isn't really there. The reflection seems out of sync, but your perception is the part that slipped. Lighting plays a role too. Overhead lights can cause minor motion blur or shadows in mirrors, especially if the surface isn't perfectly clean. If you move your hand in uneven light, the reflection might show it at a strange angle or with a flicker. Combine that with a moment of poor focus, and your brain might register the motion as mismatched. Some mirror mismatches are linked to a condition called derealization, a temporary state where the world feels strange or unreal. You know what you're seeing, but it feels distant, off, disconnected. Mirrors become a common trigger because you expect them to be reliable. When something seems off, it adds to the unreality. There's also something called the strange face illusion. If you stare into your own eyes in a mirror under low light for more than a minute, your brain starts to distort the image. Facial features may appear to shift, blur, or transform. This isn't magic. It's your visual system adapting to low input. Your brain fills in the missing details and sometimes creates new ones. This happens because of neural adaptation and the lack of stable stimuli. You're staring at yourself, but your perception begins to drift. But most mirror mismatches don't happen in the dark. They happen in broad daylight. You're brushing your teeth, fixing your collar, turning slightly, nothing dramatic. But your reflection doesn't line up, and not in the slow, obvious way a poor webcam lags. It's subtle, quick, just enough to break your trust in the surface. That's what stays with people, not the delay, the break. The assumption that the mirror is a perfect copy, always fast, always true, is disrupted. Once it happens, you can't stop thinking about it. You test the mirror again, raise a hand, nod, make a face. Everything's back in sync. But you watch more closely now. Some people report it happening more than once, always short, always unprovable. You tell someone and they say, "It was probably your imagination." You agree because what else could it be? But part of you keeps watching. There are stranger stories too. People who see their reflection smile slightly before they do, or look sad when they're feeling fine, or tilt the head the wrong way, just once, just for a second. You blink and it's gone, back to normal. But the moment sticks. These stories overlap with folklore. In older cultures, mirrors were seen as portals, not just tools. They weren't trusted. Covering mirrors during mourning wasn't about superstition. It was about the belief that reflections could trap or echo souls. Even in modern times, people report feeling watched in their own reflection. Not by themselves, but by something using their shape. From a psychological view, the mirror is a special kind of object. You see yourself but flipped, familiar but reversed. Your left becomes right, your right becomes left. It's close to you, but not the same. That reversal alone can create a tiny dissonance, especially if your brain isn't fully anchored in the moment. If your sense of self is even slightly off, the reflection may seem to act independently. Some people take it further. They suggest the mirror shows not just your image, but your copy, a version of you that exists on the other side, and occasionally the copy glitches. It doesn't mean harm, it's just not perfectly tethered. And if you notice the delay, that means, for a second, it slipped. A brief failure of mirroring. Like a simulation forgetting which side it's on. You don't need to believe in portals or glitches to feel the weight of the mismatch. You just need the experience. That half second where you're not sure who moved first. That flicker where your brain can't explain what it saw. That moment where you stare into your own eyes and think, that didn't feel like me. And maybe it wasn't. Or maybe it was you, just seen from the wrong angle at the wrong moment, in a frame that doesn't always behave. You look again. The reflection smiles when you smile, frowns when you frown. All is normal. But part of you remembers the difference. Not what happened, just how it felt. You're talking with a friend. The conversation's casual. Nothing serious. You're mid-sentence, moving through a topic you've covered before. Then both of you, at the exact same moment, say the same thing. Not a cliche, not something like, "it is what it is," or "at the end of the day." You say something strange, specific, something you haven't said in months, maybe ever. It might be a line from an old movie you haven't watched in years, a turn of phrase from childhood, a weird metaphor like "slippery as a buttered eel." You're not quoting a meme. It's not trending. It's not on your minds for any reason, but you both say it. Same moment, same tone, same weird sentence, then silence. You look at each other, and one of you says, "How did we just say that?" This kind of shared speech glitch happens more often than you'd expect. People finish each other's sentences. That's common. But this is different. This is two people generating the same strange line at the same time without prompting. No one cues it. It just comes out synchronized. Sometimes it happens during a pause. You're both thinking, and then one person starts to speak, and so does the other. Same phrase, same rhythm. The moment freezes because your brain catches up to what just happened. You're not just aligned, you're mirrored. You try to explain it. Maybe you were both thinking about the same thing. Maybe one person said it first, and the other repeated it a half second later without realizing. But that's not how it felt. It felt simultaneous. You heard yourself say it. You heard them say it. And neither of you remember triggering the thought. There's a neurological basis for some of it. When people spend enough time together, they develop shared language. Friends, couples, co-workers. Over time, you pick up each other's patterns. You start using the same phrases, the same jokes, the same speech rhythms. Your brains align through something called neural coupling. That's why you can finish each other's sentences. Your minds predict each other's words. But this doesn't explain the obscure ones, the ones that show up from nowhere. You weren't talking about penguins, but you both say, "slippery as a penguin on linoleum." You weren't quoting anything, but you both say, "that's like putting socks on a snake." Where did it come from? Memory is flexible. It pulls old content forward when it finds loose associations. But when two people do that in perfect sync, it becomes hard to track. Either you both made the same subconscious jump, or something deeper was happening. One possibility is unnoticed priming. Maybe you both heard a similar phrase earlier that day, a passing comment, a lyric, a sentence from a podcast, and your brains filed it away. When a certain emotional cue hits, tension, laughter, awkward silence, it pulls the memory to the front. And because you were in sync emotionally, you spoke at the same time, the same trigger, the same memory, the same phrase. That's a clean explanation, but even that doesn't always fit. Some shared glitches involve made-up phrases, words you don't remember ever hearing, lines that feel invented in the moment. You both say something like, "that's tuna in the glove box." It doesn't mean anything, but it comes out together, like a scripted joke you never wrote. Then the moment passes, you both laugh, ask each other what just happened, try to reconstruct it. But the mystery holds. There was no build-up, no setup, just one sentence from two mouths, perfectly matched. Some people call it telepathy, not in a mystical way, but in a casual sense. Like minds syncing up without direct communication. You didn't send the thought. You didn't hear it from the other person first. You just arrived there together. And when you did, the line came out. Others think of it as a glitch, like a line of dialogue that played twice in the same frame. The simulation forgot to randomize speech, so the same file ran in both speakers at once. It's not proof of anything, but it feels like something slipping, like the illusion of independence dropped, and for a moment, you were two versions of the same node, delivering the same output. There's also the possibility of group mind states. In psychology and anthropology, this happens in rituals, music, dance, or intense focus. People begin to move, speak, and respond as a unit, not from pressure, from alignment. Their brains fall into rhythm. Their timing becomes shared. Their thoughts overlap. In these moments, people can say the same thing at the same time without rehearsal. It's not magic. it's synchronization. But shared speech glitches happen outside those settings. You're not chanting or singing, you're not even focused, you're just talking, and then it happens. The more it happens with a specific person, the more you notice. Some friends can't go a week without saying the same phrase. Some couples report moments where they not only speak the same words, but have the same dream, or think the same thought right before one says it aloud. You don't plan it, you don't force it. It just shows up, like the sentence was already waiting in the air, and you both picked it at once. Most people move on. It's funny, it's weird, then it's gone. But if it keeps happening, you start to pay attention. You look for patterns. What were you talking about? What did the phrase feel like? Did it mean anything? And sometimes the answer is no. The phrase was nonsense, a verbal hiccup. But the sync wasn't. That part was real. That part is what makes you pause. You didn't just say the same thing. You said the same unexpected thing at the same exact time, with no clear reason why. And in that moment, you were on the same track. Not just in language, but in timing, rhythm, and thought. You don't need to know what caused it to recognize it. You just remember the moment. Clear, precise. Like watching a scene play out that wasn't yours to write. You look at each other. You laugh. Then you wonder. Not what you said, but how you both knew to say it.